You tap dance, Jay.
It'll be entertaining. I've got my shoes.
Did we lose Alex? No.
No, he's there.
What's that?
Making sure you're still there.
So Kim, 61 Reed Street A is off?
Both
Or
are
no?
off. Sorry, we can't really approve B without A.
Both are off? Okay.
Yes. Three, 7, 9, and 10, Jay.
Okay, so we have about 29 or 30 people and attendees, so it looks like it's
We're liable.
everyone's here. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's get going. Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Claypool. Welcome to the October 15th, 2020 meeting in the Board of Architectural Review Small. I'm going to chair tonight's meeting. With me are 3 board members, Glenn Gardner, Julia Martin, and Bill Huey. We have 2 members of city staff, Alex Howe and Kim Lavin. The order of the meeting is as follows. Staff will give a brief introduction to each application, after which time the applicant has a 10-minute period in which to present the application, and that's the applicant and anyone speaking on behalf of the applicant. To anyone speaking, please state your name clearly for the record. The applicant's presentation will conclude, then public comment period for 10 minutes will open. Again, anyone providing public comment, please state your name clearly for the record. We'll then hear from staff as to its comments on the application and its recommendation. The applicant will then have a, say, 5-minute period of time in which to clarify anything he or she feels needs to be clarified, respond to any comments that they think need to be responded to, but to be clear, not to reopen the application, not to start getting into new material. That period, at that point in time, the floor closes, the board will then deliberate and ultimately make a motion and vote. The board is free to ask questions of anyone at any time, and by custom, we tend to ask those questions right on the heels of the applicant's presentation. There were 4 agenda items that were originally published that we're not going to hear tonight. They are as follows. Agenda item number 3, 350 Grove, number 7, 109 Rutledge, number 9, 61 Reed Street, House A, and number 10, 61 Reed Street, House B. Again, those 4 agenda items, we're not going to hear them. Please, reminder to myself to turn your phone off and others. And please limit your comments to architecture. That's our purview, and that's the only thing that is that we can sort of pass on. So limit your comments accordingly. So the first agenda item is 0 George. 0 George. Kim, you're on mute. Kim.
Still on mute.
You're on mute.
Thanks. Just meeting protocol, staff will control the PowerPoint presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, not board members or staff, will only be given the capability to speak when they're called on during public comment period. The chat and the question and answer functions have been disabled for everyone. During public comment, the applicants and all team members and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as in in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of the public meeting format. If you've registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called in order by project. Members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting for the duration of the project they've commented on, and staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. For the board members will be polled by chair for comments and for their vote on the motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chairman shall reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chairman if he has not reread the motion accurately. If a board member needs to recuse, he will temporarily be removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into an executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio in the Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they are ready to return to the regular meeting. Staff will issue meeting results, including staff comments and board motion, to the applicant following the meeting. Results will also be posted on the city website at www.charleston-sc.gov/BAR. For additional information, there are a couple websites you can contact, including the aforementioned website. If you're experiencing technical difficulties during the meeting, head to our website. These proceedings are being recorded.
Okay, first agenda item is 0 George.
This is just protocol. It's requesting an extension of final approval for demolition. Just going over the context slides here. It's behind 25 George Street. It's 1970s building.
Kim, I think the screen stopped sharing. Is anyone else ever able to see it?
No. Okay, now I can.
Got it?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
Weird. Okay. So here it is in these context photos. Just to show you that here's the approval from 10/13/16.
Okay.
Protocol.
All right. Is there any board discussion? As I understand it, Kim, the applicant's entitled to 1 year's extensions as a matter of right, basically.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Is there any discussion?
No, I'll move for approval.
Okay. Is there a second?
Lynn Gardner, a second.
All right. I'll call the roll. Julia,
Yay in favor.
Glenn,
In favor?
Bill,
Yay in favor.
chair votes yay in favor. Motion passes unanimously. So the next agenda item is 62 Hanover.
62 Hanover Street is requesting approval for demolition. It's a category 4 in the East Side neighborhood, circa 1872 in the Old City District. Just to give you a little context, here's Hanover Street's on the eastern side, just south of Line Street. Some existing site photos from Google. This is the north elevation. This is looking at it from the rear at Aiken Street. Here's the 1985 survey card. There's a little bit more information about it. And the Sanborn maps from 88 and 1902, depicting pretty much the same building. And if the applicant's here and wants to take it from here.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Earl Brown. I'm the chairperson of trustee board of Vandross Moultrie Church. We are requesting for demolition at 62 Hanover Street. We also, for the application for Board of Architecture review application and building planning permits application for the demolition. Also, we had a structural engineer from Lambert Engineering to do the structural engineering investigation. And also we had a South Carolina archive history report, and also had the no trespassing prosecution for trespassing by the police department, and deliverability as well too. At this time, we are requesting demolitions for 62 Hanover Street. Please note the following reason for the demolition request. Number one, the building is extremely poor condition. Two, the structural framing has been damaged from termite infestation and wood rot. Three, rehabilitation of the building would exceed 50% of the value. Four, if renovation exceed 50% of the value, the building would be required to meet the current building codes. Five, in addition, the building is current, a setback is in the code violation. Six, the building would need to be raised to comply with the 2018 IRC. Seven, it would not be economically prudent to renovate due to the serious state of the building. Eight, the building is unsafe due to the advanced state of deterioration. Nine, the structural components are very weak and continuing to deteriorate from termite activity and water intrusion. 10, water continues to attract termites and rot wood. 11, the metal roof is badly corroded and leaking. 12, the house is clad with appeared to be asbestos siding, which is known as carginium. 13, the house is located in the flood zone, which requires the first floor to be elevated. 14, although the house is boarded, the homeless has entered and was evicted. 15, the city fire department has placed an X on the building, noting in the event of a fire, the building will not be entered. It is a safety hazard. 16, the building is not insurable in this condition and is a liability to the church. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Okay, does anybody have any questions right now?
This is Julie. I have a quick question for Mr. Brown. Can you just briefly explain the history of when the church acquired the property, how long that's been?
Probably about a quick reply back in.
May I speak to that question?
I just second speaker, Reverend Menace, at that time.
Yes, Reverend.
Yes, thank you so much, and good afternoon to each of you. I'm Jetson Runza Manis. I am the pastor of Vandross Memorial CME Church, and I would like to address the question that my good sister there raised. Hugo hit Charleston in, I think, 1989 at a Category 4. At that time, I was pastoring in Macon, Georgia, and I brought a load of goods from Georgia to Charleston to help out churches and so forth in the area. Not knowing at the same time, years later, I'll become the pastor of this church. But this building and the church acquired this house back in, I'm going to say, roughly around 1980s, thereabouts. They had it before Hugo hit. After Hugo hit Charleston in '89, the old church was destroyed by Hugo, and a new facility was built there. And while the new facility was being built, the chairman of our trustee board at that time, according to our records at the church, Mr. Ezekiel Cross, petitioned the city a few years later, asking to demolish this building because we wanted to use the space for parking because of the limited number of parking slots that we have there. This building being removed from the area was give us more parking, and it would also help dress up the area much better. And that came about because the building at that time was only about 12 inches from the sidewalk. So it was really in violation of the codes at that time. So since early 90s, and to this time, the condition of the building had continued to go down because it still floods in that area. The parking lot of the church floods, and there are times when it floods and we cannot even hold worship service in the building, and the water still gets into that building, which continues to cause the floor seals and the floor to rot and continue to attract termites and infestation of termites in the building. So yes, to answer your question, the church owned this building just a few years before Hugo hit and has owned it since then.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions right now for the Reverend or Mr. Brown? Okay, hearing none. Kim, let's go to, or Alex, let's go to public comment. And I know I've received a number of letters that I'll read, but if we have any live public comment.
We have 3 people who have signed up to speak. We'll go first to Julie O'Connor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Julie O'Connor with Save Our Structures Charleston, a local nonprofit dedicated to ending demolition by neglect and advocating for the preservation of endangered structures. Our board met to discuss the demolition of 62 Hanover Street. This house is a textbook example of demolition by neglect. Our research indicates that the house was constructed sometime between 1855 and 1859 and has a significant and interesting history. The most notable owners were Dr. Edward Burroughs and his wife Sadie. They owned the house from 1923 to 1983. Dr. Burroughs was one of the most well-known African-American doctors in Charleston. He was actively involved in the Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, was physician for the local school district, helped organize the first football team for the Avery Institute, and established the first clinic for African-American infants at the Old McClellan Hospital. Mrs. Burroughs was also an active part of civic life and worked as a teacher and librarian at the Avery School. This house, its history, and the stories of its occupants deserve to be preserved. While we recognize the cost associated with restoring a structure that has been allowed to deteriorate, this is certainly not in the category of the worst structures on our survey, and we believe it is absolutely possible to rehabilitate. The applicant indicates that the house would need to be raised in order to meet current FEMA requirements. So we also want to point out that this site is currently in an AE 13 flood zone, but will be changed to an AE 10 flood zone on January 29th, 2021. We ask that the BAR deny this application.
Question. Elaborate, if you don't mind, the AA10 and AA13.
Reverend, we're going to hear public comment, and then y'all can respond to the public comment.
Thank you.
So the next speaker will be April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. Historic Charleston Foundation has reviewed the application for demolition of the historic building at 62 Hanover Street. We are sorry to see this historic structure in the neglected condition it is in today. This building contributes to the historic character of the neighborhood and with effort can be successfully rehabilitated. It is therefore important that this historic structure is retained. We recommend denial of this application. Thank you.
And lastly, Aaron Minigan. Just a second.
Thank you. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society of Charleston is opposed to this request for full demolition. This Charleston single house is indicative of the vernacular of the neighborhood, and as observed on site this morning and illustrated in the BAR submittal photos, it contains a significant amount of intact historic material in salvageable condition, and there is great potential to restore this house to its original character. Previous examples of structures in far worse condition prove that successful rehabilitation is possible. We generally do not find the engineer's basis of economic prudence to be a just case for demolition and encourage the applicant to consider options available such as a FEMA variance to avoid full elevation. The Preservation Society strives to be a resource to property owners and project teams faced with complex preservation challenges and would be happy to meet with this applicant to discuss potential options for successfully rehabilitating this building. We ask the board to deny the demolition of this historic building to allow the potential for its rehabilitation and continued preservation. Thank you.
Okay, Alex, is that the end of live comment?
Yes, no more live comment.
Okay, we received a number of letters. I'll read them to you. The first from Kyle Parker, who writes, please don't allow 62 Hanover to be demolished. We'd be ashamed to lose that house on the street. It is obvious that it is not able to be saved. It is obvious that it is not able to be saved. If the church cannot afford to rebuild it, they should have to sell it. Same rules should apply to individuals as churches. Charles Haber of 55 Columbus writes, purposely neglecting a property should not be rewarded with a permit to demolish. It is a historic structure, and just because it is in the east side, it is no less valid. Just because the owner is a church does not validate its neglect. The church has always had the option to sell the property to someone who would repair and maintain it. This is rewarding bad behavior when in fact the owner of the property should have been fined repeatedly to either force it to be made into a habitable structure or to sell it. There's always the need for affordable and/or workforce housing. The church could have been aiding the community by renovating the structure. Andrea St. Amand of 50 Hanover writes that she opposes demolition request. The property has significant history and salvageable elements. The property was originally built between 1855 and 1859. It has suffered intentional porch damage over the last few years. The porch was secured from further neglect and the structural elements were removed, causing a partial collapse to the second-story porch. Our concern is that the owner of the property will continue to allow the home to suffer demolition by neglect or intentional demolition without BAR approval, rather than making attempts to save or sell it. In fact, the property immediately south next door is currently being renovated and saved and was in a much worse condition with few historical elements. Steve Bailey and Beatrice Bernier from 38 Nassau write that they oppose the demolition of 62 Hanover. They don't think it's a close call. We've inspected the building from the outside and feel it can be saved. Besides the upstairs porch, the house seems in reasonably good shape. In fact, the house next to ours on Nassau was in far worse condition and was renovated and is now a fine single-family home. Built in 1872, 62 Hanover fits well into the streetscape. The house next door, 60 Hanover, is now being renovated. Allowing the demolition of number 62 would mean that there would be no reason to block the demolition of 61 Hanover just across the street. Both properties can be saved. The house is owned by the Vandross Memorial Church, which does good work in the community. We very much appreciate its good works, but there is no reason that churches should not be held to that same standard as other owners. To allow this application to go forward will set a bad precedent for other churches with historic properties in poor condition. Today, BAR agenda offers a case study and why 62 Hanover should be saved. The Freedman's cottages at 20 and 22 Shepherd were owned for many years by Mount Carmel Methodist, which was prohibited by the BAR from demolishing them. They were sold to a private investor this year and are now seeking your approval to renovate them. We think if the church does want to renovate 62 Hanover itself, Shepherd Street could offer a roadmap and what can be done. Stacy Barrington writes that she opposes the demolition of 62 Hanover. It's yet another example of demolition by neglect. Allowing tear down in cases like this extends a long line of bad precedent. Additionally, she understands the local church owns the property. We cannot allow organizations that pay no taxes to contribute to the deterioration of our historic city. The history of the East Side is so often overlooked, and so many buildings have been allowed to fall into disrepair. And this part of Charleston has literally lost some real gems. We cannot allow this to continue. Across the street from my own Charleston single home at 59 Amherst sit 4 uninspiring concrete cinder block homes. In 1972, these townhomes replaced a historic home that fell into disrepair and was deemed by the Evening Post a sick house. 48 years later, we are still dealing with our fair share of sick homes with few solutions, but to demolish at the expense of losing what we claim is so valuable, preservation of our historic city. See below 62, 64 Amherst before and after. It's sad to see what the East Side has already lost in its failure to find greater solutions for preservation. In a city that banks on tourism and the public's appreciation for our historic buildings, we have a responsibility to do much better. Tour groups began coming into the East Side in the last few years. This brings revenue into the East Side, which was once all but ignored, despite the rich revolutionary history of what was once Hampstead Village, a women's and civil rights movement born out of the cigar factory, the smokestacks of the old city incinerator, Philip Simmons' house, and so much more. We must support the structures surrounding these historic sites, and likewise the reasons people are starting to visit and learn more about this side of town. I strongly recommend the city deny this demolition request, politely advise the church to find a better way. They can make a greater and wiser contribution to the neighborhood by selling to someone who can restore the home at 62 Hanover. Stacy Barrington, 59 Amherst. Lastly, separately, Tim Weber and Christina Ray Butler write the same letter, which is that they write in vehement opposition to the proposed demolition by neglect for 62 Hanover and the East Side. Vandross Memorial Church is in the circa 1872 single house in question since 1994, has done little to maintain it or prevent its deterioration in that time. The stewards and owners of a historic house, they neglected their duties and maintenance, and instead of selling the building in the event they were unwilling or unable to find its upkeep, they chose to allow it to deteriorate. Demolition by neglect must not be taken lightly, as it sets a bad precedent for other negligent property owners. Since the survey in the 1970s that ranked 62 Hanover as a Category 4 house, East Side has lost dozens of historic houses and other buildings, and the loss has accelerated in recent years due to lack of maintenance and arson. It's therefore even more important to save 62 Hanover and to preserve the architectural character of the East Side that is still intact. As a case in point, there are several vacant lots within a block of 62 Hanover where historic homes have already been lost. Lastly, this building does not appear to be past the point of renovation, especially considering the neighboring house, which recently caught on fire, was in a similar state of decay and is currently being renovated. If Vandross Memorial cannot afford to repair the home, 62 Hanover should be sold rather than be allowed to deteriorate further or demolished. Again, Tim Weber, Christina Ray Butler. Okay, if there's no other public comment, can we hear staff's comment and recommendation?
This building contributes to the historic streetscape of Hanover Street and the historic character of the East Side neighborhood. The Board of Architectural Review is guided by the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, and approving this demolition is antithetical to these guiding principles. Although the building suffers deferred maintenance, the building is not beyond repair. This building should not suffer demolition by neglect. The charge of the board is the preservation and protection of old, historic, or architecturally worthy structures in quaint neighborhoods which impart a distinct aspect to the city and which serve as visible reminders of the historical and cultural heritage of the city, state, and nation, according to the zoning ordinance. Staff's recommending denial of demolition. Thank you, Jay.
Okay. Reverend Manis or Mr. Brown, you'll have an opportunity to ask questions, respond to any of the public or staff comment, basically address whatever you've just heard since y'all spoke.
Question that I have was the R13, R10 that I heard someone mention in a letter or article that you just spoke about. And then I would like to understand what they mean by R13 and something R10. Okay,
we'll tell you what, let's then go to board discussion and deliberation. And if one of my fellow board members could help explain sort of the flood zone categories, that may be helpful to the church and just understanding, the significance of that. Does anybody on the board want to lead off the discussion?
Sure. On that technicality, Reverend Manis, what was being referred to is the required elevation based on FEMA's regulations. And the point is that after January 29 of next year, you would not be required to elevate this structure as far as you would now. It will be 2 feet less at that point. At the same time, I think you're also eligible for a FEMA variance if you decided you didn't want to elevate it at all. Generally, I mean, I don't have really much to add to public comment and staff's comments. I think it's pretty clear which way this is going. And I do feel for the church, and I recognize they find themselves in a difficult position, but I think it's pretty clear that this structure is worthy of preservation. And as has been said, there are many that have been in worse condition, which have been fully rehabilitated and now really contribute positively to the city. So I'm hopeful that you can find your way forward on that path. And I appreciate, for example, the Preservation Society's offer to speak with you about some help toward that end.
Presently, what is the elevation
I don't
for
know
that
that.
area?
I don't know that. That would have to come from an elevation certificate. I don't know.
So in January of next year, then it'd be 2 feet lower than whatever it is now.
Correct. Yes, sir. That's the
Essentially.
significance of the flood map change. Okay, so we're still in board discussion. Does anybody have any other thoughts to add to Julia's comment? Any board member?
Glenn Gardner, I would just reiterate the hope that the church may take advantage of the offer for maybe some community input and partnership from Preservation Society or any other interested parties who may be able to help them forward. It certainly is a shame to see the building continue to deteriorate and detract from the neighborhood when in reality, I think there would be a potential there for the building to be restored and to be a positive in the neighborhood right beside the church. And I would just highly encourage that they attempt to find a path forward to keep the building before it does get too far, so that there's a positive influence right there in the neighborhood.
Any other board comments? I would just add that I agree with staff in thinking through other applications in similar context. Somebody made a comment along the way about there's been, many more homes in significantly worse condition that we've required to be preserved rather than deny the demolition request. I agree with that. I mean, there's potential here. I understand it's, some significant deferred maintenance issues, but I think back on other similar structures and how we've treated those. And I think we would be entirely consistent here to deny demolition just based on how we viewed things like this in the past.
I'll go ahead and make a motion unless I'm interrupting. I'll go ahead and make a motion for denial of demolition.
Okay, so Julie's made a motion for denial. Is there a second?
Second.
Was that Glenn or Bill?
Yeah, Glenn.
Okay.
I'd like to say something.
Tell you what, we're gonna go ahead and, well, yes, sir, go ahead.
Yes, the building is a safety hazard. As we spoke before about the X on the building. If the fire department, the building catch on fire, if they're not able to go in the building, it seems that to be unsafe. I think it's an unsafe structure right now to the community and the public. And also at this time, there's a weather begin to change for the fall, the one for the winter. We got vagrants that are coming in. They might start a fire and cause different problems. Here, the house is barely deteriorating and it's rotten. And also,
is that Mr. Brown speaking? Yes, sir. I appreciate it. We've heard your comments. That's the order of the meeting is y'all sort of say your comments up front, and now we're voting. So I appreciate where you're coming from, and we've heard you. But now we're in the part of the meeting where the board votes. So I'm going to sort of take control back here and kind of go back to where we were, which is in a vote. And so I think Julia had made a motion for denial. Glenn had seconded it. So I'm going to call for the roll here. Julia?
Yay in favor?
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes yea in favor, so the motion passes unanimously.
And I would, if I might add, Jay, I would
Please.
hope that perhaps Kim and Alex can connect Mr. Brown with the contact information to hopefully get some input from preservation groups, because at the end of the day, the church is the property owner, and the property owner, as with any property owner, has to be responsible for their property that they own. And so it sounds like they may need a little bit of a guiding hand in taking care of their property if they're not able to do so themselves.
Okay. Thanks, Glenn. Okay. Yeah, thank you. 20 Shepherd Street, next agenda.
20 Shepherd Street is requesting approval for demolition of additions. It's a category 4 in the East Side neighborhood, circa 1890, and in the historic materials demolition purview. For some context, here's the property located on the north side of Shepherd Street between Nassau and Hanover. And here's some existing site photos. This is the east elevation. Here's a survey card from the 1985 survey. Extra information on it, description, gabled roof, 2 rooms deep, and some Sanborn maps from 1902 and 1944. Earlier maps didn't cover the area. And if Ashley's here and wants to take it from here.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right, great. Hi, I'm Ashley Jennings. I'm the architect on the project, and I'm representing my clients, Colina Bassett LLC, which is actually a husband and wife that purchased the property. The proposal for you tonight for 20 Shepherd is to remove a few additions on the back of the building that we think are in poor shape and not part of the original structure, and to do an addition. And I know the BAR doesn't have jurisdiction over the addition, but we're actually asking for demolition approval for the portions in the back and for some rework to the entry, the entry wall in the piazza. Next. So one of the things to note in this property is also in an AE 13 flood zone. The first floor is at 11.5, and we are proposing to raise the structure because we are outside of that FEMA variant zone. There was some discussion today about the consideration for AE 10, but that the intention is to move forward with this property and start the permitting process before January 29th if possible. So here you can see in the existing, the first image is the existing structure, and you can see these additions that we're proposing for demolition. They're in pretty bad shape, and the board was able to walk around and look at them today. And then the other consideration is this area in front where the piazza screen wall is. Next slide. So you can see here the existing front elevation and the south, the west elevation here, this being the south, but the street elevation, this being the west elevation. You can see the grouping of additions on the side that we're proposing to remove. And then you also see on the south elevation, the elements that surround the piazza screen wall. There's some brackets here and a roof element that we think were original. And there is a spot, I don't know, it's very small, but on the west elevation, you can see where there's an existing parapet wall above, and then the wall steps back below. And there's a turned column that sits here below. So the proposal is to go back to a more traditional piazza screen wall below the upper portion of the parapet. Next slide, please. And here you can see the, on the north elevation, the area that we're proposing to remove those additions, and also on the east elevation. And then the proposed south and east elevations. Next slide. So you can see here in the photograph that enlarges the piazza, you can see the upper portion of the parapet wall and then the wall stepping back. And we are proposing to move the wall up to where the parapet wall is now. There's some evidence of metal roofing that goes all the way to this parapet wall. And also it looks like there might be some wood shingles below. There's some discussion on site today about whether or not we pick the further beyond plane or the plane that's out at the top. We're open to discussion about where that parapet wall goes. But we were making the assumption that the piazza screen wall goes, but we were making the assumption that the upper portion of the parapet wall was the original. And that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Questions? Okay, if not, how about public comment?
No public comment on this one.
Okay, how about staff comments and recommendation?
Yeah, so the new firm takes effect January 29th, as Ashley mentioned, and getting approvals pending the adoption of those maps would be best course of action for these buildings. Not only would it provide further retention of historic fabric, but the investment of elevating the building could be substantially less. So should the board deny demolition of elements such as be a big consideration. So just a couple staff comments. The piazza screen door, steps, and columns are unique features to the cottage, and their relationship to the street should be retained. If forging ahead before January, split the stairs to the entrance so that the piazza screen is maintained near its current location to retain the columns. Perhaps shifting a few inches forward or back would be appropriate to get an extra stair in. The roof, northern gable, and siding vent should be retained. Disengage the roof, the addition from the historic building to retain the fabric and prevent demolition of the standing seam metal roof or the elements on the north gable wall. Maintaining the primary volume of the Freedman's cottage is most important, and so staff are comfortable with the demolition of the ancillary additions. So staff's recommending approval for the demolition with staff comments noted and final review by staff. Thank you.
Okay, Ashley, any sort of clarification?
Sure, can we go back to those photographs one more time? And specifically, I want to look at the piazza screen wall. I know this is a really tiny photograph, but what I wanted to get clear on was salvaging the two columns below this area here. Can y'all see my cursor, or are you seeing? Okay, you're seeing. Kim is doing a good job being Vanna White for me. So I think that my concern with the proposal to save it as it is, number one, the steps are in bad shape. I don't know if y'all can see, but they're settling. And trying to salvage that, I think, is going to be difficult. We could certainly mitigate the change in elevation from the front of the building inside the piazza to get the stairs to work out when we raise the structure. But trying to salvage that concrete portion below those turn columns might be difficult. And also the turn columns don't actually sit very well on top of that. So trying to salvage something would be really recreating and making more sense of it, I guess. So that's where I wanted to get some feedback from the board is how you might see that happening.
Okay, thank you. So let's do this. Let's go into board discussion. And if any of y'all need some clarity on staff comments, and we can ask Kim, or if you think you understand it, we just go for it. But anybody want to lead us off here?
Yeah, this is Bill. I guess a question for Kim regarding the staff comments. I believe what I'm sort of surmising from the comments is the encouragement of retention of these columns and the basic configuration of that entry feature. But I believe to Ashley's point, with the stairs and the bases of those columns being in questionable condition, and I'm sorry I wasn't able to get to the site, but she stated that being sort of concrete, which I'm going to take for that. Is our purview being over demolition, are we crossing over then into more of a design commentary of what will be? If we made the point of saying retain the columns and maybe the upper part of that cornice there, but that the concrete steps could be demolished. I'm trying to understand how we could draw a line there to, take care of the apparent structural problems that are there, but still require the retention of the elements that you're looking for.
Well, when I say steps, I think I'm referring to the location of the steps and how the steps meet the sidewalk and then proceed to go through the piazza door. So I don't mean those exact steps. Yeah, they're obviously not to code, so they would need to be altered. But the configuration of the stair, piazza screen door, columns, we'd like to see retained. And I don't think, it's not crossing that line if they retain, those elements.
I see. I guess where I was thinking the line might be, are we saying retain in situ or retain for use?
I mean, they're not going to be able to be in that exact location. So I think for use.
And when you're saying columns, you're talking about the wood columns, not particularly, the concrete base.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm just making sure, and again, I might be just playing semantics here, but obviously our purview of demolition, and I just wanted to make sure, we can say retention of elements, but not in situ.
Well, if it has to be raised and elevated per code, I think that carries forward. Meaning the board could choose to retain the columns, and just rebuild the stair similar to what's there. I think that's very appropriate request.
Okay, thank you. I guess carrying on, I do really have no issue with the, as staff's comment reflected, the sequential additions to the rear of the property. I believe that I might want the other members who, unfortunately, again, I'm sorry I wasn't able to visit the site, who did see the site, maybe to chime in more on the piazza screening and elements there. And I would love to hear their opinions on that. But I do agree generally with staff's comments and directive.
This is Julia, and one of my original comments was going to be that I'm really glad to see this structure being preserved, and I like the clever way that the architect has accommodated a second bedroom in a sort of loft configuration. And I recognize that you're using a little bit of the existing gable attic space for your bathroom, but I'm hoping there's some way that you can at least reveal a little bit of that back gable and not completely erase it with just extending the roof. I don't know how you could just extend a turn metal roof in the same plane. So I'm hoping that at least some little depression to delineate where the historic roof ends could be accommodated without really wrecking your clever design. And regarding the piazza screen, I'll be perfectly honest, with all due respect to both parties, I could not really tell definitively. To me, the condition of that piazza screen now is probably the result of someone getting creative in the last 50 years. That's kind of what it says to me. It just seems sort of stream of consciousness at hand. So I could potentially be okay with Ashley's proposal to just have a traditional piazza screen there, especially since, like everyone said, it's going to have to be structurally upgraded and rebuilt anyway.
Any other discussion? I'd agree with the applicant that sort of, I guess I'd call it a knee wall, whatever that thing that supports the column, that's in pretty poor shape. And I don't, to me, the stairs don't sort of scream character defining feature. I do like the wooden columns, and I hear Julie's point about maybe they're just sort of, after the fact gotten there somehow, maybe not original to the house. That's my 2 cents. But is there anybody feel like more discussion is warranted, or are we ready to make a motion?
Yeah, I mean, this is Glenn. I see both sides of the column discussion. My initial thought when I looked at it this morning was that the columns are a bit awkward below the brackets and were probably added, salvaged, shifted from another location creatively. At that point, they are intriguing. They've been there for a while, but I could kind of go either way on that. I think typically you wouldn't have those columns under the brackets, but again, I think this little house had different things done to it over time, and we just sort of have to pick whether to leave it a little funky or whether it needs to go back to fit probably closer to the recipe of what it likely was when it was initially built.
Go ahead,
I'm going to
Julie.
try to make a motion and just see where it goes for approval of demolition with staff comments 2 and 4, and a board comment to provide a visible break at the end of the historic gable roof, and final review by staff.
All right, does anybody want to discuss Julia's motion before I call it for a second? All right, is there a second? All right, is there anybody want to make sort of a competing motion?
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I might have been prepared a second. I was just reading through those comments one more.
Okay, I'll sit tight.
Just one.
Yeah, Jay, are you able to, or can Julia restate it, or can you just restate?
Okay, sure. I'm going to read the staff comments so you got them. All right, so Julie's made a motion for demolition with the following 2 staff comments and a board comment, final review by staff. And the 2 staff comments are that if forging ahead before January, it's number 2, split the stairs to the entrance so the piazza screen is maintained near its current location to retain the columns, perhaps shifting a few inches forward or backward. And then maintaining the primary volume, the Freedman's cottage is most important. So I guess that's really a compliment. So staff's comfortable with the demolition of the ancillary addition. So it would exclude 1 and 3. And our board condition is to provide a visible break at the end of the historic route.
Mr. Chairman, I'll second that motion.
Okay, so Julie's made the motion I just read off. Bill seconded it. I'll go ahead and put it to a vote. Julia,
Yay in favor?
Bill,
Yay in favor.
Glenn,
Yay in favor.
chair votes yay in favor. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Okay, next agenda item is 22, Shepherd.
22 Shepherd is requesting approval for demolition of door and window openings and a portion of the front facade. It's a category 4 in the east side, circa 1890s, in the historic materials demolition purview. There's another aerial image showing the property on the north side of Shepherd Street between Nassau and Hanover. Here are some existing site photos. Aerial view. And the 1985 survey card. Sanborn maps from 1902 and 1944. And Ashley, if you want to take it from here.
Thank you. Once again, Ashley Jennings, architect representing Kaluna Bassett LLC, same couple. This house is in a little bit worse shape. The interior is completely gone in terms of reference to existing rooms. The only thing that's left really is the chimney, which we're proposing to retain in terms of the interior layout. The proposal is to reference the existing pad to create a new piazza and to remove a little portion of the front of the building to create a bay, so a request by our clients. So if you want to move forward to the next slide, please. So what you see here is the existing structure. We're proposing to close up a couple of the openings in the very front piazza and to remove a portion of that front to create the bay. Next slide. And you can see here, if you look at the existing west elevation, the proposed west elevation, where those two openings sat that we're proposing to, one of them is actually, we're actually proposing to put a window opening and a door opening. The other window opening would be closed in. And then you can see on the south elevation, which is the Shepherd Street elevation, the area that we're proposing to remove to create a bay. Once again, this structure has to be raised because it's in the same flood zone. This one, the finished floor elevation is closer to, we think, 10. So it's a little bit lower than the other structure in terms of the relative to the base flood elevation. And if you want to move forward to the photographs, please. Oh, here you go. Okay, so here's the structure itself now. The exterior materials, at least on the south and the west side, are in fairly okay shape. There's some salvageable material there, but it's lacking on the east side. The roof material is in pretty good shape, but the rest of them, the structure inside, I think every single member is going to have to be cistern, and of course it'll have to be raised. Next slide. Or is that it? Oh, here's the other side. All right, does anybody have any questions?
Okay, if no questions, is there any public comment?
Two people who signed up to speak. We'll start with April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the request for demolition of door and window openings and a portion of the front facade. The two windows on the front elevation are character defining elements of historic freedmen's cottages and should be retained. Likewise, it is common for these structures to have separate entries along the piazza. While we commend the applicant for their work to rehabilitate these important structures, we recommend denial of these proposed demolitions. Thank you.
And second, we have Erin Minigan.
Thank you, Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society is very glad to see the structure being rehabilitated. However, we are opposed to this request to demolish historic openings and a large portion of the front facade. The Secretary of Interior Standards urges the avoidance of alteration of materials and features that characterize a property, and applied to this instance, it would be highly inappropriate to modify the historic fenestration. In addition, the proposed new design with the bay window on the front facade is foreign and conjectural. Under your purview, we urge you to deny the removal of historic material, allowing for the inappropriate modification of openings on this important indicative type of architecture for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Okay, is there any other public comment?
No other public comment.
Okay, we'll go to staff comments and recommendation.
Preservation of historic architectural elements in their existing form is the objective of the historic materials demolition purview. Preservation staff appreciate the retention of the existing form and volume of the cottage. We just have a couple staff comments. The original fenestration of the west facade should be retained, as modifying the openings would demolish historic fenestration and alter the character and form of the Freedman's cottage. Splitting the stair at the piazza screen could increase the space of the elevated piazza floor. Retain clapboards and fenestration of front facade as to not modify character or lose fabric of the building. Staff's recommending approval for demolition with staff comments noted in final review by staff. Thanks.
All right, so let's go to board discussion. Or I'm sorry, Ashley, do you have anything you need to clarify?
I'll just respond to the comments. We understand the concern about removing the portion of the Shepherd Street facade, and we just ask the board to consider it. It's something that my clients asked to have added, the bay, and so I'll just appeal to you to at least consider it.
Okay, so board discussion.
This is Julia. I'll start. Ashley, the bay that you drew is really cute, but I do agree with staff and the preservationists that the configuration at Shepherd Street and on the west elevation are both really important to maintain. And like before, I applaud you and your client for getting ready to restore these buildings. And I really think that once the owners see it restored with some cute shutters on the front, they will never remember that they wanted a bay. I think they'll like it.
Anybody want to add to that?
I agree, Glenn Gardner, I agree with regard to the bay. I mean, I understand the request, but I also completely agree with the comment Julia just made.
Any different thoughts, or somebody want to make a motion then?
This is Bill. I make a motion for approval with staff's comments noted and final review by staff.
Okay, is there a
Second
second? All right. All right, I'll call the roll. Bill,
Yay in favor.
Julia,
Yay in favor.
Glenn,
Yay in favor?
chair votes yay in favor. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, next agenda item is 145 Moultrie.
145 Moultrie is requesting after the fact approval for the demolition of roof, category 4 in the Hampton Terrace neighborhood, circa 1931, and in the historic materials demolition purview. Context again at the corner of President Street and Moultrie. This is the roof that was demolished. More existing site photos. And this is view from across the street, or looking across the street rather, and adjacent houses on Moultrie. This is the original building permit information. Building permit. Location for building permit, Sanborn maps from 1944. Previous motion was denial of after the fact demolition of roof and roof material replacement. Replacement in like kind recommended to be subject to final review by staff of material appropriateness from 5/28/2020. Board comments were, it appears to me that work done previously to interior of this house has made it more difficult to carry load paths from roof down to the foundation. Our charge as board members is to protect the exterior of these homes and retain the character defining features. The tile roof is a major character defining feature of this house. As a board, we have to abide by the Department of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. I agree with staff and Preservation Society comments. Another board member said, what staff and other board members have said has all been well articulated. We are charged to protect what is visible from the public right away. And another board member said, normally a well-detailed copper roof would be praised by the board. This is a very different situation. Staff and board would have to review samples of old and new tiles to see what would be acceptable alternatives. And if the applicant's here and wants to take it from here.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Ms. Lavin, thank you for your time today. I own 145 Moultrie Street. I took out permits to complete work on my house. I installed scaffolding around the perimeter of the house and began repairs. I quickly found the structural damage much more extensive than I had anticipated. Also, the roof had multiple coats of Hydrostop or Silaflex. The roof had failed. The roof, if not original, was very old and it had done a great job. One of the reasons I bought the house was my appreciation for the roof. I should have stopped work at that time, taken out a permit to remove the roof, but I was concerned about the ongoing damage to the interior elements of the structure. I should have stopped work and gotten the permit. I was wrong, and that was a mistake. But so you know, and for entrance, I did stop the leaking into the house and the damage to the interior fabric. There's the roof was a successful selection of material and installation, and it lasted 80 years. But the roof is gone. And there is a bigger picture here than the roof material. It's not money, it's historic fabric. The introduction to all preservation standards note that the standards are to be applied to specific rehabilitation projects in a reasonable manner, taking into consideration economic and technical feasibility. That is written on every preservation standard. Preservation Brief 4 begins by stating a weather-tight roof is a basic in the preservation of a structure, regardless of its age, size, or design. The previous roof did not meet this test. The existing roof certainly does not meet this test. Another early statement notes that the roof is a highly vulnerable element of a shelter that will inevitably fail, and a poor roof will accelerate deterioration, which was the case when I bought this house with this roof. And again, it's certainly the case with the roof I have on the house now. Failure issues with tile include tile cracks and breaks when hit. Low quality tile will craze and spall. This roof lasted as long as it did because it had been coated multiple times. Brief number 4 says that the related features and support systems should be thoroughly examined. Will the repairs be effective? This must be considered with every repair. This is in the brief. These repairs cannot be made on this house without removing the structure and replacing the structure. On alternative materials, in a rehabilitation project, there may be valid reasons for replacing the roof with a material other than the original. The historic roofing may no longer be available, or the cost of obtaining specially fabricated materials may be prohibitive. But the design to use an alternative material should be weighed carefully against the primary concern to keep the historic character of the building. This allows for negotiation of the roof, and this is in preservation brief 4. The practical problems, wind, weather, and roof pitch should be weighed against the historical consideration of scale, texture, and color. Preservation brief 16, the use of substitute materials on historic buildings. Historic exteriors. Substitution of materials is not a new practice. We all know that from when wood roofs were put on, and then metal roofs were in sometimes very short order installed directly on top of them. Emphasis that substitute materials should only be used when all repair or restoration alternatives have been explored. In this case, that has been completed, and without removing all of the original framing and reinstalling it, we can't put that tile roof back on. 4 circumstances warrant consideration of a substitute material. Unavailability of historic materials, that's not the case. Unavailability of skilled craftsmen is not the case. However, inherent flaws in the original design and materials is the case, and code required changes is the case. Again, this is in preservation brief 16. Specifically states a secondary reason for considering the use of new materials is their lighter weight. For some materials, a reduced need of a maintenance and reasons become important if the need for dead loads change. Brief 4 states in the summary that consideration of alternative materials should be considered where the original cannot be used. The historic concrete tile roof was at the end of its useful life. Restoration and repair of the original material was not a viable option. Matching tile roofing materials have been considered, but not to be installed on the existing historic framing as it is. The roof framing support systems were previously removed sometime during the 20th century. Replacement in kind would create further loss of historic fabric, as the roof would need to be reframed, reconstructed to support the new tile roof. Reframing would diminish the integrity of the historic structure and would not meet the current building codes. Inherent flaws within the roofing system and code compliance must lead to consideration of a substitute material according to preservation brief 16. A standing seam copper roof provides a reasonable alternative roofing material that is contemporary to the construction of the building and compatible to the character of the building and the surrounding neighborhood. I believe that the replacement of the tile with copper falls in line with preservation brief number 4, as it would create an effective weather-tight roof without additional loss of historic fabric needed to reconfigure the roof framing. This repair option would be the least invasive roofing option that is compatible with the character. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Any questions right now? Board? Okay. Is there any live public comment? We've received a number of letters here.
We have 3 people who signed up to speak. I'll start first with Julie O'Connor.
Julie O'Connor with SOS Charleston. Our board met to discuss the demolition of the roof at 145 Moultrie. This application should be denied both for procedural reasons and on the merits. This project first came before the BAR as an after-the-fact application where the owner said the roof structure could not support tiles despite having done so for 8 decades. The city opposed it and the BAR unanimously rejected it. A few months later, the owner again appeared before the BAR to make the exact same argument. Again, the city opposed it and the BAR again unanimously denied it. Now the owner is here for the 3rd time, making the same argument while the roof remains unfinished. On procedure, the city should not permit owners to return over and over. Wars of attrition would never be tolerated on the Lower Peninsula, and it is unfair to subject uptown residents to them. It is already hard to muster preservation-minded people to speak up about uptown projects that tend to be small or unassuming. Making the community attend a never-ending number of replays will make it impossible. If the BAR entertains this, the BAR will invite an unending series of applications over houses like the recently unanimously denied 5 Glenwood Avenue. No enforcement of a BAR decision will be possible because the owner will just refile and claim that he's waiting for yet another decision. Many of the small houses SOS Charleston is concerned about are already in bad shape, And by eliminating any sort of finality from a BAR vote, the BAR will be eliminating the one practical way that the city can encourage either restoration of houses or transfers to preservation-minded buyers.
They do their homework.
On the merits, there is nothing more to support the request than during the two earlier meetings. The house had an unfinished attic for decades. No one ever saw the interior support walls, and there's no building permit for their removal. Since the space was an unfinished attic until recently, it's hard to imagine why an earlier owner would have removed such a feature. But even if anyone were ever convinced they had existed, support walls could easily be added back now. The historic tile, which is still in place on the detached garage, was a beautiful and absolutely appropriate feature of work by Stephen Thomas, an important early 20th century architect. Lastly, recall that this is an after-the-fact application. The BAR would certainly not have approved this application if it had come to the board in the appropriate order of events. We ask that the BAR deny this after-the-fact application again and require the applicant to install a new tile roof.
Next, we'll go to April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. We agree with the comments by Ms. O'Connor. HCF has reviewed the application for after-the-fact approval for the demolition of the roof at 45 Moultrie. This application has already been heard, considered, and denied by the BAR. We do not feel that new information in the current submittal justifies another appearance before the BAR. We are very concerned about the BAR process and the precedent that this rehearing of a BAR denial sets. Furthermore, rehearing a denied request that is not substantially changed from the previous request takes time away from other applicants who've been waiting several weeks to get on the agenda. HCF supports the decision of the BAR and recommends denial of this request for after-the-fact approval of the demolition of the roof at 145 Moultrie. Thank you.
And lastly, we'll go to Aaron Minigan.
Thank you. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society continues to oppose the request for a copper roof in place of the previous tile roofing material and is disappointed to see this request back before you once again. As we feel the materials submitted are not substantially different from the previous reviews and provide no new compelling evidence, we reiterate our position. The tile roof was the primary character defining feature of this house, and we feel copper is not an appropriate replacement option. The engineer's letters and multiple site visits with the board indicate there are feasible structural interventions that would allow for installation of replacement tile or a similar material. We wholeheartedly feel there are options available to restore the tile roof, and we feel the applicant should be held to replace the historic roof appearance. We remind the board that its purview pertains strictly to the exterior visible areas of the building and urge you to consider that if this request came to you in the proper manner before the material was removed, it's highly likely you would have denied the request as the tile roofing was a significant character defining feature. You must approach this request with the same mindset. On a note of procedure, we feel it's inappropriate for the same request to come back repeatedly without new substantial evidence and take up space on agendas and time during board meetings. We urge you to stay consistent and not get worn down. Please deny, yet again, this request for a copper roof and require the applicant to explore available options to restore the previous tile roofing appearance. Thank you.
Alex, any more live public comment?
No more live comments.
Okay, we've received a number of letters. I will summarize the letter from Teddy McRacken at 365 President, Bo and Michaela Mueller, Gordon A. Maynor, Alan Mooney Barnes, Katie and Lyles Gear at 153 Moultrie, and Lee Bennett at 274 Congress say that they express their support for approval of the placement of a copper roof on the home and thinks it's in keeping with the style of the neighborhood. Some more in-depth letters from Leslie Benson at 363 President. She writes that the home is amazing and adds so much character to President Moultrie streets. Since we bought on President over 6 years ago, I've always found your home to be the most attractive. I know living without a finished roof for more than a year has been frustrating. It's sad the city will not approve a copper roof. and okay with the temporary roof. City approves metal roofs that are less attractive all the time. I'm not familiar with the city's approval process, as there are so many obvious unsightly finishes that have been approved in our neighborhood. I support your request to replace the previously unsightly Spanish roof with a new copper roof. The new roof will add to the historic character that your home already brings to our street. And in my experience, the copper solution will be safer for all of us, as a copper roof is more durable, less likely to come apart with flying debris during hurricanes. I know the majority of the homeowners in the neighborhood agree. Robbie Marty writes on behalf of the residents at 145 Moultrie. He understands that the original roof material 145 Moultrie was removed without prior BAR consent. However, now that the material is gone, it seems as if further discussion or action on the matter will only serve as punitive damage. Perhaps foregoing a roof for close to 2 years is suitable punishment. Anna and Jeffrey Montgomery write that it's their understanding that the owner, James Metters, is requesting approval to install a copper roof. We fully support his intentions, as this is a quality material choice. First, the aesthetics of this type of material will blend well with the architecture of the home. Secondly, Mr. Metters' choice of copper will provide outstanding protection for many generations, while over the lifespan of traditional architectural shingles or terracotta tiles. Finally, there are many fine examples of copper roofs over in Charleston, so use of this material will fit nicely with the historic fabric of the community. John Rangel writes in support of James Metters' application to add a copper roof to his home at 145 Moultrie, replacing the original concrete tiled roof. They become the immediate next door neighbor at 151 Moultrie. Please consider this letter representative of enthusiastic support for Mr. Metters' proposed work for 145 Moultrie from his proximal neighbor. Michael Floyd at 363 President Street writes to voice his support for the hopeful re-roofing of the home at 145 Moultrie, adjacent to Hampton Park. As I understand, you've proposed to re-roof the home with copper, which I and numerous others in the neighborhood feel would be beautiful and certainly more fitting. Since they moved in the neighborhood in 2014, they've admired the street appeal of the curbside home and the corner lot, but have always questioned why the home had a Spanish mission style concrete or synthetic tile roof. It's rare to see that sort of roof style or material in Charleston, and feel that proposed copper metal roofing selection is more architecturally consistent with other homes throughout the neighborhood and the city. Okay, Alex, no more public comment. May we hear staff comments and recommendation?
As we've said in the past, if this came to the BAR staff properly and before the fact, staff would have denied the request. We do feel copper is a great material and is fine in the appropriate context, but the BAR has no jurisdiction over new material. Our purview ends at demolition. So the staff is again recommending denial of after the fact demolition. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Metters, you want to say anything in response to staff or public comment or clarify anything?
Yes, Jay, thank you. And thank you, everyone there, both the public comments, the staff comments, and the board for your time to hear me again. And I guess the reason that I am back on the agenda is, I guess it is because in my professional world, which happens to cross over with my personal world here, I don't have the flexibility to look at just the roof. When I think about the total body of work, the embedded energy that is in this structure, it certainly includes the sheeting, the rafters, the masonry, that supports that, down to the foundation. And when I hear the comments that are made by Julie and April, and I'm shocked that no attention is given to anything other than the veneer, what you can see on the outside. My point is, if the consensus is we're going to put a new tile roof on there, I'm making it clear that will be at an expense to this structure. John Moore knows what he is doing, And we've searched for a way to not have to replace the trusses and the decking, and we can't find it. And new point loads, because of the settlement in the house, are going to have to be found. And we've spent a lot of time and money, because one of the reasons I bought the house was it had a tile roof on it. So I just want to make it clear, this is not a waste of time to me, and I'm sorry that the public comments, it's been a waste of time for them, because the reason that Charleston is what it is because we take the time to listen to each other and learn from each other. And here, what I'm trying to help everybody understand is there was nothing left to save on that roof. I should have gotten the permit to take that off. I've acknowledged that, no question about it. But moving forward, we're going to lose a lot of historic material here to put a tile roof back on. And I just think it's important for everybody to understand that. Thank you, Jay.
All right, Ms. Ryder. Okay, we're in board discussion now. Anybody want to take the lead on this item, kicking us off?
Glenn Gardner, I have one point of clarification, and this may just be a staff confirmation or clarification, but I thought when I first saw this back on today's agenda, I thought we left it the last time with tile options to be explored based on availability and so forth between the owner or the applicant and staff. And I didn't know, did any of that actually happen, or was it deemed that there were no tiles available? I just wanted to clarify where that discussion landed to bring us back to the current copper application.
Is that to me, Glenn, or Kim?
Well, really to either of you, I guess. I just wanted to, I thought that's where we were, in the last meeting.
It is, and yes, there were, I guess, 6 different tiles that I looked at, and the weight of those tiles began at 8.25 pounds per square foot and went to 14.65 pounds per square foot. None could be installed on this roof system. And then another tile that came in that was an imitation, it was a tile made from recycled materials. We got that one and we found that would work. And that is a viable option using a recycled material. And so I acknowledge that is. I hated to use that, but that would be a possibility.
So, and not to take the floor, but I guess my question to Kim or even to the other board members would be, if there is a tile option made out of a recycled material, does that change our thought with regard to material as far as tile versus copper? Does that put us in the same boat? Or I'm just wondering,
Glenn, in the end, we only have purview over what we've lost. So,
right.
So that's demolition.
Okay.
We can't
So really, just to clarify that, Kim, I guess a tile out of a recycled material would be on a level playing field with a copper roof or whatever, because it's still demolition of what was there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
This is Julia. I'll just add another question. Is what was there, does that exist anymore? I mean, is that available for replacement? And I guess I'm asking James.
Julia, this was made by we did a lot of research on it. Mr. Stevens had a concrete tile company just after you go past the Round Holiday Inn and you get to Albemarle, that's where the concrete tile company was. And these roof tiles were made there. They are not, that doesn't exist anymore, but there are tiles that look similar. I would not anticipate using a concrete tile. I mean, I think it would be better to go to a clay tile, but the weight of the two are similar. It was originally red and then had been painted black and then had been seal flex black a couple of times.
All right. And Kim, has staff reviewed the products that are available to replace what has been lost? Is there a particular product that you want to see reinstalled?
We haven't taken a look in any depth of what is still available.
I mean, it sounds like James in a vacuum would be leaning toward clay tile if he were going to replace this substantial roof, but that's not an exact in-kind replacement of what was there.
But again, we don't have any purview over what will be going back. So we can only say yes or no to demolition. We're recommending Nile.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hate to say it, but I don't really see what's different from before, and I just don't think we really have any latitude. And I understand what the applicant's saying about the effects on the rest of the historic structure, but all we can judge is what he's calling the superficial, what's visible to the public. That's our purview. And I feel like we're trapped in terms of what we can, how we can alter our previous motions or change our minds or compromise. I don't see that we can. But other members, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Well, I will, before Bill, I'd love to hear what you and Jay also have to say. I think procedurally, the board has its hands tied with having to deny the application, because we have to base that decision on what we would have ruled on without the roof being removed. And that roof was absolutely character defining. I don't think obviously I don't think the owner makes any bones about that. My concern is trying to find, there has to be a path forward if that roof material is not sitting on a pallet in the yard. And so procedurally, I would make a motion for denial of an application to remove the roof. But I guess I'm questioning, is there a board comment to allow for a site meeting to look at other material, be it the recycled material, be it a clay tile, be it the copper? I just don't know. I see Kim shaking her head. I don't know what the path forward is, truthfully, if that roof material isn't sitting in the yard.
Well, Glenn, I think James indicated that there is a similar material available, and then the difficulty is just that structurally he will be obliged to figure out how to alter his house to support that.
Kim, I don't know if you want to address that. This is Bill. Yeah, I just basically want to go back to basically Kim's point to reiterate, obviously demolition is our only degree of purview here. I assume if the tiles are gone, then there is going to need to be some form of replacement to, as closely as possible, mimic the roof that was there before, subject to staff approval, or it would be staff approval in that case. And I just wanted to sort of throw out one more thing, an observation, hearing all the public comment in the letters. There is a little bit of danger in what we're hearing from the public comment, and the fact that there seems to be sort of an underlying theme in that, well, just sort of wholesale replacement of one character defining feature for maybe another type of roof. They're seeing merit in that, and it's kind of counterintuitive to what all of us know is good preservation practice. So, I hope that that's not something that perpetuates to the degree that there may be some folks up there who either have a degree of either resentment for the board and the board process, or maybe take something into their own hands and do a replacement, without approval. That's kind of dangerous, to hear those kind of things being bannered about. So And I know Mr. Matters is one of the high respected authorities in preservation and consultant and construction. So I know you don't like hearing that as well, but I know the counter to that is it supports your position, but it's just a little bit bothersome to me to hear that kind of sentiment going on. And I hope everyone can understand why I'm saying that. Again, I believe cut and dry to our purview says demolition. So we basically, as Kim has stated, only have the authority to deny demolition. But then it's, I believe if the material is gone, it would be incumbent to obviously the applicant, the owner, and staff to resolve the appropriate replacement scenario, not this board. So I think it's fairly cut and dry, and I think we're in the same position we were before.
Bill, I'll sort of piggyback on that. I think that's right. When you peel back the layers of rhetoric and all these other complicating factors that have sort of been piled on the underlying issue is, in my mind, still fairly cut and dried. It's an after the fact request for demolition, and I struggle to remember any time when we've gone ahead and approved it. Procedurally, we always deny it. And then I think practically speaking, what we try to do is set up some framework to try to get the next best thing, or the next closest thing, I should say, to what was there, knowing that what's gone is gone. And so I think that's where we've been sort of headed on this one for the last time we heard it. And I'm still in my mind there, which, so the motion would be denial. And then we try to, that's the tricky part, is what do you do next? But I mean, the motion would just simply be denial. And then I think it would be to try to find a process where the next closest tile would be put back. And whether that's at a board decision or staff, and we don't have purview over what goes back, but we would just leave our motion at denial of the after the fact demolition.
Jay, it's Glenn. I agree with you. I mean, I think that is where we are. That's what the board has a charge to do. I guess the question then is, can the applicant meet with staff to determine how to move, how to move forward with that next best option? Is that, Kim, something that you all are able to do?
So we've been going round and round. I think that this is an inherent flaw in the zoning ordinance, and that yes, we will be happy to meet with James. But there again, I think there's little we can do here.
Because at some point, be it James or anyone, and I agree with you, Kim, at some point there has to be something to move forward to get him out of the the purgatory of a denied application that would, in theory, remain on file with the property, and then go to livability and so forth. So I think, I'll be the guy to make the motion for denial as submitted, and my hope is that the applicant and staff can determine a manner in which to move forward.
But I think that's it. I think that has to be it. I think maybe we're spoiled as a board in that when we've been in these situations before, at least me, I'm not privy to how it actually works its way out, whatever it is. But I know it does. And that's basically what we're saying here. And I feel a little guilty trying to unload it on staff, but I don't know where we have the authority to do anything else.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think that legally we as a board are able to to do anything beyond that.
And I guess I would chime in one more thing. And I said, yeah, as Kim had stated, I believe there's some form of, if you want to call it a loophole or whatever in the ordinance, that maybe we could try to work on getting closed up. At least in this situation, we're dealing with an applicant who knows the drill and is the best to work with us to find a reasonable solution to this. So I do support Glenn. I don't know if that was a formal motion you made, but I do support it.
Yeah, I'm happy for that to be, if that's recorded, sure.
Okay, so Glenn's made a motion for denial. Bill has seconded it. I'll call the roll. Glenn,
Yeah, in favor?
Bill,
Yeah, in favor.
Julia,
Yay in favor.
and Chair votes yea in favor. So the motion passes unanimously.
Jay, thank y'all.
Thank you, James.
Thank you very much. That was a great debate.
All right, next agenda item is 735 King.
$735 King is requesting preliminary approval for construction of a new one-story drive-through cafe. Excuse me. It's new construction in the north central neighborhood in the historic corridor district. Here's an aerial image of the west side of King Street, just south of Fuji, and the existing site photos. Some context photos for you at the intersection of Fuji and King. This one's looking south. Previous motion was conceptual approval with board comments to study maximizing green space, including shielding driveway, entry and exit, and restudy of roof and facade materials. This was from January 23rd, 2020. Some of the board comments were this context is definitely in a transitional place. It's weaving itself back together. And so this is an appropriate addition to the neighborhood. Another board member commented, restudy metal material. Another comment was rows of cars will be visible from the corner and greenery or some sort of screening will help. Another member said, this does not fit in an urban neighborhood context. It's not pedestrian friendly. And finally, another member said, beautiful design reminiscent of roadside architecture or Euro gas stations. And if the applicant is here and wants to take over.
All right, I'm here. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, wonderful. Thanks for having us back. It's been a while. We've been working through TRC. Actually, there's a concurrent BZA meeting happening right now, I think over Tree. I'm going to ask if you can go ahead and scan forward. I think we've covered the site context. We've included, if we'll pause a second, go back one for me, Kim. We have included some of the necessary drive-through accoutrements here. So there are 2 of these canopies with 2 menu boards. It was part of the conversation last time. I think that might have been a neighbor, it might have been a board member question the need for 2 traffic queues. That was a DOT requirement to avoid stacking in King Street. So that's why you've got duplicate of those. They're pretty small and they are located towards the rear of the property. So I think by and large, they'll have a good amount of shielding from the building. Can move forward. We may or may not have someone from Stantec with us on Zoom right now because they're also doing BZA. So that timing didn't work out real well. But their package is fully included as well as landscape. I can do my best to try to answer any questions there, but I would definitely be out of my lane. We'll keep moving forward. Okay, architectural site plan, we can go back one for a second. So you've got King Street page right, you're seeing the traffic queue. As you enter towards the top page, there is one parking space available. There is also, you can see where it feathers out to the second stacking lane, and we've indicated the location of the two menu board and canopies to the rear of the property. This also locates our accessible parking space, and I can kind of walk you through the accessible route. I think in our previous application, we did have some kind of vaguely Art Deco inspired railings towards the front patio, which also had a railing that was being driven by a ramp. So we worked through grades where we have no ramps any longer. We're able to provide full accessibility from the sidewalk and from the accessible parking to the rear, simply with the grading of the sidewalk along the north side of the building. So as traffic migrates around the building, you can see the pickup window page right, and we'll get into the floor plan after that. There's also two more parking spaces towards King Street. Next, please. The floor plan has by and large remained the same. The one area of change worth noting is the patio detailing that I mentioned previously. So we've been able to abandon the railings, and we have included a wood and steel bench that I think opens up the sight lines a lot better, is more inviting, more transparent, fosters itself more for hanging out, frankly. At the same time, provides some sort of barrier for kids running off the edge of the patio into the lane of traffic. So that's actually a design element we're really pleased with, and we have details later in the set. I think all of the board members present were previously present, but a quick run through of the floor plan. It's very basic. It's essentially kind of three zones. You see the area labeled service, which is really like the barista station. That's essentially inside a glass box, fully visible. Espresso station. You'll have your point of sale. We have two windows. So we have a walk-up window, which we're hoping there's a lot of neighborhood interest in pedestrian and bike. So there is a window where you can walk up with accessible counter service there. And then you can see south side of the building, the auto window. The kitchen, which is somewhat of a misnomer. Actually, if we go forward one sheet, I think we have a page with, yep. So equipment, you can see the bottom. There's no cooking equipment. There's no hoods. There's no exhaust penetrations in the roof. It's essentially refrigeration and some dishwashing, ice machine, office. Another area to point out all the way to the rear of the building, it's exterior to the heated and cooled space, but within the building envelope and under the roof, we've got two areas for trash and recycling. Those are also constructed to where they have a platform above them, but within the screen where we're going to be able to accommodate our HVAC. We worked with our MEP engineers to do a ducted mini split system. So we are fully capturing our trash, recycling, and HVAC out of view. Next, please. Roof plan is about as basic as they come. It is a monoslope roof, single slope shed. We have changed the metal that was being used. That was a comment from the previous submittal. The original submittal had more of a warehouse, large rib, galvanized. Actually, it was white previously. And we have gone to a different finish by the same manufacturer that's more of kind of a buff color. So it's a little softer, doesn't look as industrial. We've also integrated a gutter into the back of the building that's captured in the roof edge detailing. Next, please. So you can see before and after with the previous submittal at the top of the page, the current submittal below. The main feature still being this large folded roof, where we've really accentuated kind of the weight of that by wrapping the fascia with the same metal, albeit in a smooth without the ribs to it. So that all matches and reads kind of monolithic, where it's folding down to be a home for the sign. We have just this last Monday installed similar signage at their North Charleston location. So when we eventually make a sign submittal, I can have some good photographs to woo everyone with. It came out pretty fantastic. You can also see that the railings have been removed. Not a great amount of change. We're now showing ceiling fan. I think we can go next. Similar conversation, with the one difference worth noting is we've worked on the fenestration at the drive-through a little bit more to incorporate the canopy, which previously was drawn but not really developed. So now we've elongated it, made it a little more asymmetrical, was able to work better with how we structured the windows, and we're able to actually hold the canopy up so it wasn't floating in the air. Next, please. Streetscape. Obviously, I think we're right in harmony with scale of the streetscape. Next, please. So previous 3D study to the left, more of a current rendering to the right. I think in addition to the change to the roof material, the most significant component here, which is visible now but wasn't before, is the wood ceiling, which is beneath the canopy over the patio and then extends into the food prep area where the barista station is. We really wanted to create this sort of seamless continuation where the kind of glass box concept is reinforced by the ceiling material being consistent inside and outside. That'd be a Western red cedar, tongue and groove, square edge with a clear finish on it. Next, please. Building sections, I won't belabor, but we have been through a pricing set with structural engineers. So 4SE has sized all of the beams indicated, columns indicated, foundation plan. There are micro piles which aren't shown, but that's not visible. So you can see how we're structuring the transition from kind of the lighter weight glass box towards the front to the more conventional metal stud and masonry framing towards the rear. Next, please. Details mostly focusing on the metal roof transitions and the soffit conditions, as well as the concealed gutter. Next. We're proposing aluminum storefront, bone white finish, super clean. No funny tents or anything beyond a low E. Impact rated, so we won't have any external fasteners for any sort of shuttering system. And we were able to confirm that we can get the drive-through window with a custom powder coat to match. Next, please. Window details. Pretty straightforward considering it's aluminum storefront. Next. Details for the bench. So we're proposing sort of a stacked sapele wood seat with steel tube legs and sort of like a custom bent angle or tube steel support bracket. That'll be just simply embedded with epoxy fasteners and a flange to the slab. Next. The only visible exterior lighting is this sconce being proposed, which has previously been approved by the board at both the Daily and Butcher and Bees Morrison Drive location. I think there's only 2 of these visible, and they're at the bathroom door and employee door on the side on the north elevation. And then the fan for the patio. The next and probably last reflected ceiling plan. I was wrong. We have 2 more of those sconces on the back over the service doors. And next. Happy to answer any questions or enter any dialogue the board sees fit.
Thanks, David. Questions right now from the board?
I have 2 quick ones. Oh, go ahead, Glenn.
Go ahead, Julia.
Will you have to do flood protection on any of this, or you've got your stem wall high enough to catch that?
The only place we have to do flood protection is the doors.
Doors, okay. And then could you just maybe describe, we don't have really clear images of what the roofing was before versus now. Could you just help me understand a little bit why the current choice is different and better?
The basic difference is the scale of the ribs was spaced wider and they were taller, more of a warehouse panel previously. This is still a corrugated panel, but it's a much lower profile with tighter corrugations. Previously, it was also shown as white, and now we've gone to a sandstone color, which I think warms it up a little bit and plays well with the Western Red Cedars ceiling.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And the question I had was with regard to the signage, which is obviously shown on the building in your renderings, and as one of the staff comments, is that technically would be, as submitted today, is that just a reference item and an actual sign application would be forthcoming?
That's correct. So that's really for design intent, because I think the signage is a big component of this building, but we will have to, I believe, first get zoning approval, and second, we'll make a formal sign submittal to BAR.
Okay.
This is Bill. I have 2 questions. So the reinforced concrete walls that are delineated there on the side, and it's noted to have an elastomeric waterproofing. Is that, so we're assuming that's going to have the appearance of a painted, is that block wall?
That's correct. It will appear as painted block. So I've used that product a couple times long ago when I worked with Huffgood, and we used it on a couple of the schools. And I believe it was also used on the Herbert Hasel pool building. But it is a smooth finish, almost like block filler had gone in first prior to painting.
So we would see then basically the coursing of the block delineated almost as a painted masonry.
No, it doesn't transfer. It'll appear monolithic. You will not see the coursing. So it does have a built up appearance to it. It's really almost more like a completely smooth finish stucco than if it were just painted block.
Okay, and then my second was the flat stock sort of rake panels that are called out. Do you have a seam configuration figured for those? Because obviously a contractor, when you don't leave them any kind of idea of indication of a patterning of that rake, they'll take the extent of one panel, run it out, and you're left with a remnant maybe at the end. So I would just say that would be something that we would probably be looking for. Some you may want to equal either however many 3 or 4 different, rake panels as we run down the length of that side element there, rather than just having one run out and maybe have a remnant at the end is the only way they're coming out.
Yep, I agree 100%. And I think we will take that even as far as the top corner sort of coping flashing condition, because I just ended up with a job where I got a 6-inch piece of brake metal at the end. So loud and clear, we'll make sure we get that in final.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, if no other questions, then let's go to public comment.
I think we just have one letter.
Okay. We got a letter from Will Kaiser, 10 Dingle, who writes, or maybe ask some rhetorical questions here. The street behind the proposed building, Dingle Street, is a natural runoff to King Street. Will this new construction interfere with the natural watershed, or is it going to displace more water into the people's yards that will back up to this space? And 2, the volume of on the drive-through window. Will the speaker be used at only certain times of the day, and how loud will it be? There are multiple homes that will be in range of the speaker. Okay, so let's get to staff comments and recommendation.
Oh. The board requested a restudy of the roof and wall materials, neither of which have been addressed. The board does have purview over landscaping, and so alternatives to shielding the board does not have purview over landscaping. So alternatives to shielding driveway entrance and exits should be further discussed, perhaps using a wall. Our staff comments, staff continue to be concerned about the large extension and brow over the patron area, the design of which should be thinner and lighter and with brow eliminated. The roof material, a commercial snap lock, is inappropriate for the historic districts. The marquee lock system is also highly inappropriate. And then signage, sign letters should be no more than 2/3 of the vertical dimension of the front of the roof, which we don't know that dimension. The use of neon is generally not permitted per the policy statements for King Street signage. Backlit signage would probably be a better option. And then lastly, eliminate any extraneous order here signage on the drive-through canopy. For these reasons, we are recommending denial for general architectural direction as submitted with staff comments. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Kim. Could you put it back on maybe on an angle, one of the renderings, so I could see the order here and some of the other signs? Okay, so let's get a board discussion.
Very quickly, Mr. Chairman. Kim, while we're looking at this rendering, just to reiterate your first couple of comments, can you just point out here specifically your comment? I just wanted to see a visual while you were mentioning your comment. Can you do that for us? Do you have control of the cursor?
Repeat my comments?
Just really your first couple of comments.
Yeah, staff continue to be concerned about the large extension and brow over the patron area, the design of which should be thinner and lighter and brow eliminated. The roof material, which is a commercial snap lock, is inappropriate for the historic district. The marquee lock system, which you see underneath the Lodi sign, is also highly inappropriate. That one's, I think it's like a more of a flat seam. The sign letters should be no more than 2/3 of the vertical dimension in the front of the roof, which we don't have the dimension of. The use of neon is generally not permitted for the King Street sign policy. Backlight signage would be a better option, and then eliminate the extraneous order here signage on the canopy of the drive-through.
Okay, so really, I guess it's that thinner and lighter part. Can you point to that? So it's the rake and then that front element where it turns down, the thickness, the visible thickness of those. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I heard you right.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay, we're in board discussion. Bill, you're on a roll. You want to keep going, or does anybody want to?
I think we forgot applicant.
Thank you. I'm sorry, David. I almost hosed you there. You want to respond to staff for public comment?
Sure, I'd love to. I think, well, first of all, I'm glad Kim mentioned it because I forgot that the other part of the roof material we changed was that the vertical face of the turn down is now shown as a flat seam so that the corrugated doesn't reveal itself as much. I had forgotten that we made that revision. You know, I think that if I recall correctly, staff did not like this the first time it came through and recommended denial. And so I'm not surprised they don't like it still. It doesn't hurt my feelings, but it's sort of the crux of it is everything they don't like about it is exactly what I do like about it. You know, we've gone through extra steps to make that roof chunkier and more muscular. And I think that it reads very much in proportion to the height of it and to the mass of the back of the building. So I would counter that. I think to skinny it up makes it a little wispy and wimpy, and that it should have some more substance, being that the roof is the primary feature here.
Okay, so now we're in board discussion.
Mr. Chairman, very quickly, I'm sorry. Do you
going.
mind if the applicant addresses the concerns of that letter from the neighbor? I would be interested to hear that response as well. If you need to reread that. He had a couple of very valid questions.
I recall.
Yeah, I'll reread them. I will say, Bill, it seemed to be about noise and water, which are outside of our purview, but I'll reread them. 2 questions. 1, street behind the proposed building, Dingle Street, is a natural runoff to King Street. Will this new construction interfere with the natural watershed, or is it going to displace more water into the people's yards that will back up to this space? And number 2, the volume on the drive-through window, will the speaker be used at only certain times of the day, and how loud will it be? There are multiple homes that will be in the range of the speaker.
So speaking first to the water question, and I have confirmed Erica Chase is still in BZA, but this project has been going on since October of 2018. The bulk of that time spent working with TRC and specifically water. So all links have been through to check every box about water displacement, watershed, permeability, and to my understanding, without being the engineer, there is no increase to what is already a bad situation. In terms of the speaker, I don't have an answer for that, but I'm happy to dig into it a little bit deeper and see if there are any, controls, volume levels, et cetera, that can be dealt with, during hours of operation. But knowing that intersection as well as I do, I don't think it's going to be the thing people hear that's going to disturb them. So I think they're both really good questions, but I also don't believe in the end either are going to be a problem.
I just want to say thank you for addressing that. I know that's not our purview, but oftentimes the public really only knows of interaction at our board. They don't really know of interaction at other boards. So I appreciate you addressing that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, so we are at deliberation. Anybody want to take the lead, et cetera?
This is Bill. I'll go ahead since I was already yammering on. Yeah, I believe that I would see this more as refinements to the original design that we did approve. So I believe it is on track. I am encouraged to know that the coating material will not telegraph the coursing of the CMU block. I would like to, if a motion is made in the affirmative, I would like to think that there would be a sample potentially available of that. I know now in these days it's hard to see a sample, but maybe somewhere we could get a sample of that, or maybe the applicant could point us to a building where it's been applied. And to my comments earlier about some of the seaming of some of the materials, I do think that would be something that we would want to see, that the architect has more diligent control over rather than sort of fielder's choice by the contractor. Maybe while we're looking here at the presentation, I believe to staff's point about especially that frontal metal that's now, I think it's called marquee panel. I believe maybe there's a detail of that, maybe a view of that profile somewhere in this set. If we can make reference to that, I would like to see that one more time, because I believe the applicant stated it's more of a smoother finish. Maybe the applicant could instruct us to a sheet.
Yeah, She's got it right there. Sheet A302, section detail 1 shows the transition. You can see the higher profile of the ribbed panel on the roof. And then there's a drip edge that transitions to what's depicted as a thinner panel, and that's the flat one. So we'll have flat seams there that we'll need to coordinate as well, but the ribbed profile no longer is visible on the facade.
I guess I would ask then, and I'm sorry I should have asked this earlier, but yeah, here we go. This is what I was curious to see. Is this marquee panel right here?
I believe that is it. So we will have those 12-inch seams we'll need to indicate in the drawings.
And then with the locking of these, here we go, maybe down lower here. Here we go. So what we're going to see basically is almost just like a, for lack of a better word, shiplap type effect.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty tight reveal by the time it's fastened.
111.
Thank you. I just wanted to be aware of what that was. I do think that's definitely an improvement from more of the industrial scenario we were seeing before. And I do agree with obviously the comments about the signage, making sure it's conforming with the ordinance. And I do agree with the comments about the neon and also staff's comments about the extraneous signing at the other locations, ordering and stations like that. So there are several of staff comments I am in agreement with. I guess I'm in some degree deference to the overall comment. I do think this does show continuing refinement of the design that we approved previously. Thanks.
This is Julia, and I agree with much of what Bill has said there. Again, this is not a project that would really make sense in just any location on the peninsula, but I feel like right here in this context, it does. It's the thoughtful design. It's I like the way that the front has evolved with the bench and some of the material refinements. So, and then I'm assuming that we can sort of give our informal thoughts about signage, but effectively those details are deferred to a completely different submittal. So that's all I've got.
And Glenn, any other comments? I generally remember thinking this was pretty cool. I think the the brow and everything, that's sort of like the for lack of a better word, character defining feature here. Yeah, so I like what they've done with it. Bill, if I think I heard you were kind of falling in line with staff comments 4, 5, and 6, and maybe a board comment. Is there, or is that tracking right? You might want to try to make a motion.
Yeah, I could try to make a motion. Well, you know what, Bill, why don't you do that since you had some specific thoughts.
All right, hang on. Let me pull up my staff comments on my phone. I got to do it that way. Unless you want to pull up the screen for me there, Kim, help me out.
Sure.
And also I wanted to clarify, this is a request for preliminary approval. Is that what we're looking at here?
Yes.
All right. I will make a motion for preliminary approval as submitted with staff comments.
Yes, I'd like to get
4, 5, and 6.
And then I'd also like to get a container of ginger dressing.
That's it.
Okay, Bill's made a motion for preliminary approval with staff comments 4, 5, and 6. That sound right, Bill?
Yes.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Glenn. All right, I'll call the roll. Bill?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
In favor?
Julia,
Yay in favor.
chair votes yea in favor, motion carries unanimously. All
Thank
right. Next agenda item is 9 Lighthouse.
What a way to go. Oh my. Sorry for the delay. 9 Limehouse is requesting final approval for new construction of an addition, a landing, stair from piazza to grade per historic documentation. Building to category 3 in the Charlestown neighborhood, circa 1856 in the Old and Historic District. Here's an aerial view for your context on the west side of Limehouse Street between Trad and Gibbs. And some existing site photos. And this is a image of the mock-up that Glenn has installed. This is visible. This is looking from the north side of the house. An historic image from 1957, courtesy of Historic Charleston Foundation. Another Historic Charleston Foundation image from 1957. Again. Previous motion was conceptual approval with staff comments noted on September 10th. And board comments, understand tree is the mitigating factor and important. Another member, I find it disconcerting that the addition of such an elegant original house should have such a complicated form. Another comment is agree with staff and Preservation Society suggestions. Sounds like, seems like they would be worth looking into for some simplification. Another comment was generally awesome work. Another one is appreciative of quality work they are proposing. And last comment was, is recommendation approval due to minimal visibility of the rear addition? Answer, yes. And if Mr. Keys wants to take it from here.
Are we on?
You
Hey,
are.
Glenn, yes.
This is Glenn Keys. I'm an architect for the project. As Kim mentioned, the main concern in the conceptual approval was the rooftop addition on the second floor. Kim, if you could proceed. If we could go just to maybe the relevant sheet here would be sheet A103. Next one. This is the roof top addition. The request was to simplify the roof of the addition. As you can see, the below is the previously proposed. At the top, we removed that parapet wall, which is not a historic wall. We were keeping it because it was existing. It's not historic. I've worked this out with April Wood, and we determined it is not part of the historic fabric and was added in that 1960s era of work. And we've created a longer slope up to the new addition. Next slide. Similar, you can see the next one, please. Next. If you go to A202, please. Okay. So you can see below is the one we proposed in the last meeting, and we removed that parapet and made a single slope up to the new addition, which I think does simplify the complexity of that connection to the new addition. I hope some of you may have gotten by to see the mock-up and show how we are really dodging around the tree limb, and I think it's going to be very successful. I'm excited with the way the mock-up turned out. Kim, if you would go to A203. One more. So this is the west elevation. You can see once again the difference between the parapet on the left and the single slope of the roof to the right to simplify that that connection. Kim, if you could go to A302. The building section showing how the roof steps down to avoid the large tree limbs. So we are doing some gymnastics around this tree, but we think it's important to keep the tree, and we feel comfortable we've worked out a solution that meets the needs of the program and is sympathetic to the house and to the tree. I'm happy to go through more of the drawings, Kim, if you want, or is that enough to address the board concern?
Not for me.
Okay. So, Glenn, why don't we just open it up for board questions? And so, board, if y'all want to see some additional drawings or have some additional explanation, why don't you just ask for it?
Real quick, Kim, could you go back to the photo with the mock-up? And I'm sorry I wasn't able to go down and see it, but Glenn, if you could sort of show us why you're pleased with the mock-up and what it's, showing us that we are or not seeing.
Well, it is really difficult to see, Bill, and even harder to photograph. Kim, I sent in a photograph of a close-up of that. Do you happen to have that?
Did you email it to me?
I did. It was like last week.
Oh no.
You're never going to find it, are you? But it's going to be difficult to see from the photograph, Bill. But Kim did go see it, I believe. And I know April Wood went to see it, and I think she's going to speak to it as well. But it is really difficult to see anything from from Limehouse Street.
And Glenn, so this shot right here is from the public right of way. This is what the most we'd be seeing of this right here.
That's correct. That's correct.
Thank you. That answers my question.
There you go.
And I'll chime in. It really is. It's different in person when you see it. It's different. I agree with Glenn. It's hard to photograph.
Okay. Any other questions right now, or do we want to move on to public comment?
Just for the record, that was in before noon on the deadline day.
Got it. Duly noted. Okay, public comment, 9 Limehouse.
We have one speaker. Yes. All right, we'll go to April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has an exterior easement on the property at 9 Limehouse, a grand Greek revival house constructed circa 1858. The house retains a great deal of its original historic fabric, both on the exterior and interior, but also needs extensive rehabilitation. The new owner retained Glenn Keys to work collaboratively with HCF to develop a plan to carefully rehabilitate the house while retaining as much historic fabric as possible. Some of the proposed changes are reversals of changes that occurred after 1955, including the changes to the stairs from the piazza and the dependency, and the removal of the existing second floor piazza and fill and screen. The other proposed alterations will not impact historic fabric. The south wall of the dependency has previously been heavily altered and had a different southern footprint on the 1955 Sanborn. The second floor bathroom extension is balanced by this applicant's proposed removal of the piazza infill and screen. This bathroom addition will not impact historic roofing material and will be minimally visible from the street. The mock-up shows how the branches of the live oak obscure this addition. Painting this portion of the building a darker color will further reduce the visibility of this element. We believe that this applicant is going above and beyond the rehabilitation of 9 Limehouse Street. We also believe that the work to the property as a whole will be a positive change to Limehouse Street in the neighborhood. We respectfully recommend approval of this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No other public comment, Alex?
No other public comment.
Okay, how about staff recommendation and comment?
The applicant mocked up the project on site, and so the visibility factor was clear and the board concerns have been addressed. Although the rear addition is a bit awkward, it's minimally visible and does not impact the streetscape or minimize the historic integrity of the original volume in any way. So the staff's recommending final approval.
Okay, is there any board discussion?
This is Bill. I just wanted to thank the applicant for providing the mock-up, and I do believe it's done its job. And it's the only other thing I would add. It's nice seeing that earlier photograph of the house from 1963 and see that something from that vintage can still look as good today. Unfortunately, not everything from that vintage can, personally speaking.
Yeah, this is Julia, and I did go look at the mock-up and appreciate you doing that. And, you know, although I think it's going to be visible, I feel like the simplification that you've made is really helpful, and I'm completely fine with it now.
Okay, one of y'all two want to make a motion?
This is Bill. I'll go ahead and make a motion for final approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll give that to Glenn. He got in there first. All right, so
Fine.
I'll call the roll. Bill?
Yeah, in favor.
Glenn?
Yeah, in favor.
Julia?
Yay, in favor.
Chair votes yea in favor. Motion carries unanimously. All right, next agenda item is 75 King.
$75 King Street is requesting conceptual approval for a new addition, copper hoods. The building's a category 2 in the Charlestown neighborhood, circa 1739, and in the old and historic district. Here's an aerial for your context. Almost at the corner of Trad on King Street. Some existing site photos. This is from Trad Street, and this is the location of the modifications proposed. Some photos courtesy of Historic Charleston Foundation, and this is Charleston in the Sanborn maps. And with that, the applicant wants to take it from here.
Hello, my name is Mark Maresca, and I'm the architect for 75 King. Our clients are Monica and Ken Seeger. We have sort of 3 things we were looking at. One is we have a hyphen that is 60 years old that houses a 10 by 10 kitchen, and that is the kitchen for the house. So one of the main thrusts was to go ahead and add a small 54 square foot addition to the kitchen just to make it more functional. We're looking at the original height of the existing windows and providing a roof that sort of mimics the bell cast roof of the existing house. The two other elements of this project are providing a hood on the central single door and side lights of the existing kitchen house. Kitchen house was built around 1750. It did have a hood at one time. It was wooden and had been replaced a couple of times. And 10 years ago, when the existing kitchen, which is the 10 by 10 kitchen, was renovated by Tony Merck, that hood in the old kitchen house was removed.
Excuse me, Mark, I'm sorry to jump in on you. Can you reference some sheets? I just want, while you're talking, I want to see your graphics. I'm sorry.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and we can go ahead and reference the elevation that probably shows, okay, that is sort of existing. There's sort of a 10-year-old dependency. There's a central kitchen house, and then there's this 60-year-old hyphen. And then the next sheet in the proposed sheet, which is if we can stay at this is to the right is in the 60-year-old hyphen, adding a 3.5-foot projection, which cannot be seen from King Street. The roof can barely be seen from Trad Street. I know if you were walking, if you're standing on top of that wall, you could see the top of the roof. The hood in the central part is over the old kitchen house. Those are both in-swinging doors. There are brick floors, and they've had them replaced several times, and it's just more of a water problem than anything else. The door that we propose for the kitchen addition would be outswinging. So there would be a very small sort of platform and a single riser. The windows would all be single glazed. They would be, just for ease. There's a counter right there just to add some more workspace within this very, very tiny kitchen. And that is, we would, of course, tie in any kind of drainage from the new kitchen roof to the existing guttering. We presented this to Historic Charleston, and we've also gotten approval from the two neighbors that are adjacent. One is Lou Hammond and Ann Barnes, which are the two houses that surround this house. We've tried to respect the height of the existing windows in this new kitchen addition. They are presently at 7'9", so we've sort of kept that 7'9". And that's basically it. As far as construction, it would be, again, single glazed windows. What would be below the windows would be a flat recessed panel that would be sort of integrated, fairly minimal, fairly unobtrusive. We would set this addition back from the side of the chimney, and it would just be sort of integrated within the existing sort of part to your garden.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Any questions right now?
Mark, do you have any details of these wrought iron brackets on your drawing set?
I tell you what, it will be very simple. It would be something that would be a hand-drawn sort of curl, something very, very kind of austere, nothing that would be highly decorative, something I could easily present it at the next stage. That would be nothing that would be frilly Victorian or whatever. The house is an early house, so it would have to be very, very simple to not become too much in terms of detail. The columns on this house are just square, chamfered columns, and the detailing for the most part is very quiet. So we would think of something very quiet.
just had one more question actually of staff. So Kim, is this a Cat 2 or 3?
2.
And Kim, this is an application for conceptual, right?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right. Any other questions right now? All right, why don't we do public comment?
No public comment on this one.
Okay, how about staff comments and recommendation?
The hoods over the doors at the rear addition are appropriate and necessary for weather protection. However, it should be reduced in width, extending only as far as necessary. The proposed addition at the kitchen unnecessarily creates a new opening in historic fabric, and it should be eliminated. Visibility from trad is considerable. So staff is recommending final approval with staff comments.
Is that final approval or conceptual approval?
I'm sorry, conceptual approval.
Okay. All right. So, Mark, do you want to say anything in response to staff comments?
So what we're saying is that the addition is not approved for the kitchen?
Staff is not recommending approval for the addition.
Okay, is April Wood on, has she been consulted at all? I know this is something that we had gone ahead and talked with her initially with.
So staff's recommendation to the board isn't, the board hasn't deliberated yet on it, so the board can make their own motion with their opinions.
Okay.
I don't know if April. So.
All right. So, okay, I guess we go to board discussion now then.
This is Bill. I guess I'd say one thing. Obviously, this is a conceptual submittal, so it's, you know, in sketch form. I would believe that if the applicant, Mark, if you want to make a point of potentially of deference concerning that kitchen addition, perhaps more detailed drawings might make your point, and other materials to, you know, further illustrate the visibility of that addition. It's kind of hard, you know, given what we have right now, to make that final determination. And I do rely a lot on what staff does recommend and say, but I'd be willing to leave that issue open pending, you know, a better quality and refinement of drawings. Obviously the other details, this is a category 2 building, so it is important to have, you know, some degree of refinement of the drawings so we can be very clear on what you're proposing. So, you know, I guess for myself, given in light of staff's comments, I'd be willing to look at a further refinement of the drawings if the applicant feels it would make his case a little better, to a degree of either a deferral or something to that effect. But staff is recommending an approval without an addition. I'm sure it's the applicant's point to try to get that addition approved. And in light of that, I would think a deferral might be warranted pending, you know, more thorough drawings and process.
Okay, I appreciate that. And I appreciate your looking into that.
Mark, hang on. We're in board discussion.
Okay.
Okay. So, does any other board member want to, you know, tack on a Bill's comments or comment as well?
My sense is that at a conceptual level, this is appropriate. I think that kitchen bay is tucked behind the chimney. It does not protrude into the line of the historic piazza. I would maybe like to see Sanborn maps or something to just verify the later vintage of that hyphen structure. But generally, I feel like it's appropriate. I like staff's comment about the width of the canopies at the kitchen house, I think it would be appropriate to pull them in and not exaggerate that width. Thank you, up to 44. Is that a 2-story in 44? Kim, do you know?
Yeah, it looks like a 2-story. It looks like it might be a piazza.
Okay. Yeah, so again, I think it's appropriate. And I think I'm comfortable with the level of visibility. That's my sense of it as a concept.
And that's at a conceptual level, Julia, that you're
Yes.
commenting on. I tend to agree with you, with that comment.
Kim, can you flip into the rendering, I guess? Okay. What's the dimension of the sort of the protrusion out of the wall there?
Plan might help.
From the surface of the kitchen house,
There you go. Okay.
it is 3'6".
Okay, I got it. Yeah, I guess I'm in line with Julia and Glenn in that the concept of it seems okay. I've never trying to make a decision like this, based on drawings like that. So I guess conceptually though, it doesn't. I think I'm fine with it. So whether this is enough to approve it conceptually, or whether we want to see some more refinement of the drawings to go to that step, maybe we talk about that, but that's where I am with it.
I'm going to throw out a motion for conceptual approval with staff comment. I believe it's the first one. I've lost my comments in all my papers. The one about the width of the, yes, staff comment number 1. And then we'll assume that we'll see it back with greater detail for preliminary or final.
Terrific.
All right, so Julie's made a motion for conceptual approval with staff comment 1. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Second by Glenn. All right. Is there any further discussion of it before I call the roll? All right, I'll call it. Julia?
Yay in favor?
Glenn?
In favor?
Bill?
I'm going to say nay opposed simply because I'm trying to weigh in the merits of staff's comments. I'd rather see a refinement of the drawings that illustrates it to better make the applicant's point. I'm open to the idea of doing it, but I'm going to say nay in favor due to staff's comment.
Or nay opposed. Okay, or whatever. Not in favor. Okay.
Nay, not in favor, opposed. Yeah.
Got it. All right. I just, let's get it moving. I'll vote yay in favor. So the motion carries 3-1.
And that was for a conceptual approval, Mr. Chairman.
Conceptual approval with staff comment 1. Correct.
Thank you very much.
All right. So the next agenda item is 77.5 King.
77.5 King is requesting conceptual approval for reversing a 1970s modification and restoration of facade per historic documentation. Building's a category 3 in the Charlestown neighborhood, circa 1748, and in the old and historic district. Just a little context, aerial image, and some existing site photos. This brick opening is the opening in question. This is the city directory in 1902, just a little history tidbit. And sandboard maps from 1888 and 1902. And with that, if the applicant wants to take it away.
Hello, my name is Phil Dufford, and I'm with Dufford Young Architects. Our firm is currently working with Edward and Grace Fay on the renovations of 77 and 77.5 King Street. As part of this work, we're proposing the reversal of a garage bay entry that was cut into the street facade of 77.5 in the early 1970s. We wish to return it to its earlier appearance as documented through historic research. We're working with the easement holder, Historic Charleston Foundation. I'd like to read a brief history about the building and then share with you what we're proposing. And Kim, I don't know if at some point if we could click through to those images, those photographs. 77 and 77.5 King Street, also known as the Captain Francis Baker House, was constructed in 1748. The property contained two buildings, including a two-story brick single house with two bays on the King Street facade. That would be 77.5, the building that fronts King Street. These buildings were built by the merchant Francis Baker, a colonial office holder, who also constructed the adjacent house at 79 King Street. That's a bit of history from John Poston's Buildings of Charleston. The use of 77.5 King changed over the years, as did those of the neighboring buildings on Lower King Street, a street that was initially comprised primarily of residences. Lower King Street evolved into a commercial district, as is evidenced in the attached Sanborn maps and attached photographs taken in the early 1900s. However, as the city grew in the 1920s and 30s, commercial endeavors moved north, with buildings on Lower King Street gradually returning to residential use. Based on the attached photographic research included in this application, 77.5 King Street was being used as a shop in the early 1900s. However, the store entrance appears to have been removed, with the two adjacent windows remaining or restored in the photographs taken in the late 1940s and early 1950s. In the 70s, the first floor facade was altered and the interior removed to allow for automobile parking. The arched opening in place today is the bay installed at that time. And in the 80s, this bay was enclosed with the current picture window configuration to once again accommodate a first floor living space. Our hope is to return the two bay facade as referenced in the Buildings of Charleston and as pictured in the mid-20th century images presented in this application. This restoration will be truer to the building's history and more compatible with the evolution of the properties that surround it.
Okay. Questions? Is there any public comment?
We have one speaker from the public, and we'll go to April Wood.
April Wood from Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has an exterior easement at 77 to 70.5 King Street. The applicant has done a great deal of research into the history and evolution of this historic property and makes a strong case for the appropriateness of the request to reestablish the windows on the first floor of the front elevation. HCF has reviewed and approved of the proposed alterations to its easement property, and we respectfully recommend approval of this application. Thank you.
Okay, how about staff comments, recommendation?
The evolution of the front facade is largely documented in these historic images and research that the applicant has provided. Restoring original or historic openings in the front facade is appropriate, so the staff recommend final approval.
Okay, Phil, any clarification to make?
No, I don't think so.
All right, is there any board discussion?
This is Julia, and I have no issue with what they're proposing. I was just going to say that the photographs showing cobblestone and streetcar tracks and a diversity of people and property uses in that location are really heart-wrenching somehow, but and beautiful. But I have no issue with what they're proposing. I'm just gonna throw out a motion for final approval.
Is there a second?
This is Bill. I'll second.
All right, I'll call the vote. Julia,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
Glenn,
Yay in favor.
chair votes yay in favor. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, next agenda item is 174 St. Philip.
174 St. Philip Street is requesting an appeal of a staff denial for approval to install 2 windows on the north facade. It's a category 4 in the Cannonboro, Elliottboro neighborhood circa 1850 in the Old City District. Here's the aerial showing it's between Morris and Cannon Street on the east side of St. Philip. Some existing site photos. Here's the location of the window proposed. And looking north on St. Philip Street and across the street, here's the survey card from the 1985 survey. And sandboard maps from 1902 and 1951. Right here. Right here. And with that, the applicant wants to take it from here.
Hello.
I can see you, but I
think maybe you have 2 devices on.
I'm getting a message that says my internet is unstable. Can you hear me now?
Hear you loud and clear.
Hello?
She said yes.
She did?
Yeah. So they can hear you now.
Thank you. Thank you for the board. Thank you for your service and for permitting this appeal. This appeal may look like it began in the middle of August 2020, but when our permit was initially denied by the bar staff. But for me, it began much earlier in 1996 when I purchased a group of buildings on St. Philip Street that had been horribly neglected or roped off with no pressing, no trespassing police tape. The initial purchase was comprised of 4 buildings now identified as 174, 174A, 174B, 176 St. Philip Street. Shortly thereafter, I was able to acquire 178 and 180 St. Philip Streets. A little history on 174. Records show that lot 33, on which 174 is located, was part of the original Rugley tracts in Radcliffe Borough. Ronald Rugley was a member of the Royal Council in 1769, and the property stayed with his family until 1834, when John Bulow acquired the property. His 1840 will refers to 174 as the wooden house on lot 33. So I'm dating this property back to 1840. As best I can tell, this was the first house that was constructed on Ronald Rugsby's property on St. Philip Street. The brick house to the north that you saw, 176, was identified in a deed in 1849 when Robert and Martha Stewart first purchased the western portion of lot 134. The importance of this is that 174 was a standalone building and thus largely exposed on all sides, as well as the north side. It is still largely exposed on the north side. The distance from the porch to 176 on the north side is 35 feet. If you look around in the neighborhood that which 174 is located, you'll see that a very large number of houses that have substantial amounts of property have, and north exposure, have windows on both sides of the property. 174 is located on a large lot of 206 feet deep and 60 feet wide. Until 1920, when 174A and 174B were constructed, it was the principal building on that lot, shared only with a few small outbuildings. The buildings were in terrible shape when I bought them. The roof was falling in, the chimney had collapsed, porches were falling off. Siding was so deteriorated that we had to replace most of it. Of course, there wasn't any plumbing in the buildings. Many of the supporting beams and joists were compromised. The windows were falling out. It had been converted from its original structure into a 2-unit complex. As bad as things were, it was amazing on the inside. It had beautiful plaster. It was very well proportioned. It just was not a mansion, but you could tell that it was really a nice, comfortable home. We completed our renovation projects in 1999, and I was talking to Sam Altman, who was the owner. I bought it from Charles Realty, but his family owned it. And we were talking about the work we'd done, and he complimented us on what a nice job we'd done, and said that earlier they had looked at restoring the buildings and had gotten various estimates and made inquiries and had actually received approval to demolish the building. Eddie Faber, who was my architect, and I both loved the building, and we felt we could make it into something that would work well for my plans with student housing. When we had finished with everything, we got 4 Caryopoulos Awards, and I also received the 1999 South Carolina Honor Award presented by the Palmetto Trust for Historic Preservation. Now, let me come back to the present day and to the appeal. When we submitted the renovation plans in early August, we submitted plans for unit 1 and 2. I don't know if I have more pictures up there than we were showing or not. Thank you. Okay, well, I'll refer back to those as we go. I also have a question, and I don't want to sound like I'm complaining, but I kind of had written a lot of correspondence back and forth to the board, trying to inform him of some matters, and it just kind of got bogged down. And then I was told, well, if you want to apply, you have to do it today, and you can't submit any other information. So I did not fully prepare the way most applicants would prepare, with their architect making the presentation. I had to just go with what we had. We'd already lost 2 months of construction time, so we were, eager to move forward. So I'm going to try to proceed and explain this as best I can. What we're looking at in this area, which is the crux really of the matter, there aren't any other issues as far as the design is concerned, is the location of 2 windows on the north side. Go back to those 2 windows, please. And you can tell one of the windows is partially overlaps with one of the small windows that you see, and the other window to the left of it just appears to be an addition of a new window. The wording that the board gave me when they denied our initial presentation, or not presentation, or the bar, our permit, was making new openings or fenestration changes that do not reflect the original condition is not historically appropriate. This house would not have historically had windows on the north side. The windows on the north side of the portion close to the street do not justify the windows to the rear of the building. Now, I gave the history that I presented because I was very personally involved in the renovation. And if I can do, if you have any kind of a screen share, I actually have a number of photos that you don't see that I hoped I would be able to present, and would have presented had I known I was going to kind of fall into this. But the reason, and having had that experience, I'm the one who did a lot of the work. I remember what was done. I have pictures that show when the siding was off. I have pictures showing the plywood sheathing on it that was put on. I have a lot of pictures that we're not seeing here. And I have a memory. I have memories that I got a lot of plaster in my eyes when I was doing that. And I remember that. And I just remember when we got to some of these things and re-siding the building that there were windows there. So I asked the team that was working with me on the interior to go ahead and remove all of the interior on the north side, and they've done that. And I sent some pictures to the BAR that I thought would satisfy the problem of the windows not being there originally, but we never, it was confusion, I guess, and I think probably trying to operate, you know, through emails, and the COVID experience made it maybe difficult for them and maybe difficult for me. But the long and the short of it is that I am appealing this decision for two reasons. Number one is I think the staff is incorrect and there were windows present, and I'm going to try to show you that. And number two, a very large percentage of the houses in my neighborhood that had north side windows historically. Let me run through some of the information that I shared with the bar. I felt that if I could share this information, if I could just finally get it there, they would understand what I was talking about, and we wouldn't have to go through this exercise we're going through tonight, and it would save a lot of time and trouble. On 9/21, I sent some pictures of the interior window frame to Linda Bennett. On 9/21 and 9/23, she advised that the pictures had been passed on to Alex Howell. On 9/24, Mr. Howell responded by sending a bar application and advising they would review the matter of staff meeting. On 9/24, I acknowledged the receipt of the bar application, and I sent some additional photos of the building showing another window that existed at the time of the renovation, which was not visible, in an attempt to establish the existence of another north side window that the bar didn't know about. I'm afraid this really only created some confusion. I don't know if you're showing, do you have, can I go into a screenshot? Sure. Do I have that ability to do that? I mean, I have it set up to do it if you permit it.
Mr. Bennett, here's the rule I think we're running into is that, so Kim, were these photos included in the application that was put out, like with the public agenda?
No, they were not. And what I was trying to say was when I spoke with Mr. Howell after a number of things on the thing, he finally just said, you're going to have to appeal this, and today is the last day that you can submit any information on this. And so I said, I do want to appeal it with the bar because I think I have good reason to appeal it. And but it seemed to me that it was, and I think he would agree that it was, that I couldn't put any more information in. So I didn't do it. I had all the information that I would have put in had I known I was really going to do this. You know, I didn't have an opportunity. That sounds not right. I had an opportunity, but I kept hoping that we would be able to resolve the problem and not do it. So I came up on the deadline, and then that's where we found ourselves.
I got it. So, okay, so Kim, is this the picture?
These
what
photos
yeah,
did not make
one
it.
of the pictures, and that's one of the other pictures of the one.
Did not make it to the initial image overview that gets posted on Friday.
Okay. But we're seeing them now. And are those the location? I mean, you see the bottom of the framing of the window. Is that in the same location where the
That's
windows?
where a windowsill was initially.
Right. Is that the same
top and the upper portion of it? It doesn't show a header on that picture, but you'll see a notch where the header was, and you'll see that. And when it was reframed with the new plywood siding, that some additional work and some additional members were added. You know, you find you have some deterioration you want to correct, and you just do some of those things at that time. We asked the board to please come by, and that we invited them to do that, that the building was open. But to the best of my knowledge, nobody ever came by. I said the board, I guess I should say the staff.
Okay, so Mr. Bennett, these are the pictures that you wanted to show us right here?
Those, I wanted to show you a lot of the pictures that reflect the renovation and extent of work that we did this. I've done a lot of preservation work, and I've been awarded for it, and I always try to do things in a good way. I'm gonna be honest when I tell you, when I submitted this, I didn't think there would be any, anyone would be consider that it was a problem. So I didn't present it in a way that I have the windows there. They were always there, but the windows were always there. And the photographs document that the windows were there. The confusion that when I sent a picture, go back just a moment, please. You see here that there is a small utility shed sort of looking building built around the building, and that's where the air conditioners and the utilities and that sort of thing are. When I sent one of the pictures to Mr. Howell, what I was trying to say was, and it showed another picture below the window above that one. And what I was trying to say to Mr. Howell is that, you know, there were some other windows that you, when you look at this building, that you didn't know about, just like you don't know about the two that are farther back on the north side. And I think he misunderstood the pictures that I sent and said that what I was asking for was windows in the farther back in the rear of the building, as you see, and that's not the location of the window that I sent him. Well, I never intended that to be his interpretation of that at all. And he was right, because it wasn't. The window did not, was not the window. The pictures on the inside were not in that location. But the location of the windows is drawn are within 18 inches of where those existing windows were that I showed you.
Gotcha. Okay, so thank you. I was trying to just get clarity. So you're trying to bring this back into, you know, a format where we can have a board discussion about it. Is that your presentation? And
well, no, I have some, my presentation would really, and if I could show additional stuff, and you've told me that I can't, my presentation.
Let me try to let Mr. Bennett.
We also sent some photographs that I know that we sent to y'all that are not included, that show the building when it was boarded up, that show a lot of the construction details. So you sort of have a feeling where we've come through with this building, but
you don't see those on there.
I wrote a letter last night to the staff, and I'm not really trying to pick on the staff, but I've really been disappointed, and you know, some of the feedback that I've gotten on it, and I think it's hard for everybody on this. And what I've essentially said, and I'm trying to find it.
Jay.
Yeah.
How long is this presentation?
Well, so I'm trying to, can you, Mr. Bennett, we're trying to get to a discussion of the matter. And so are you heading towards a conclusion, or I'm just trying to corral this into something where we can, you know, get to the facts.
Am I heading towards a conclusion?
Yes.
Well, I was going to say that what I received from the staff, I said, I'd gone by the office the other day, really quickly showed me what they had. And I told them that we had, were not included with the presentation that Not included with the presentation that you had put up here, and it showed a lot of the windows. I got a telephone call this morning saying, thank you for advising us of that. We'll be sure and include them, but I don't think they've been included. It would help me if I could show the other houses, if I could show
So I think
some of the,
Sorry.
some of the other photographs. And let me apologize. I think you were trying to say something, and I don't hear well at all. I have an incredibly difficult time trying to follow what y'all are saying.
Julia, were you going to speak, or Kim? Someone else going to speak?
I think that the board is just really most interested in whether or not those windows were in the location that they're proposed to be in. And the back and forth with miscommunication is, no, they're not proposed in the location where they were prior to the renovation. And Mr. Bennett, I apologize if we got this wrong. I know we've seen material filter in over the past several weeks. And, you know, if it would help you to screen share, I think Jay might give you a couple 90 more seconds to wrap it up, and then.
I don't want to speak for the board, but I think what we would all like to see, I know I would like to see, is pictures showing evidence of a window being there or two windows being there, and try to get a sense of, are the windows that are being proposed now going locations, and do we have evidence that they were there before? It is all I think what we're trying to figure out.
Does that not show it, the one that's on?
Yeah, they're right there in the photograph that I'm seeing.
Okay.
That I'm showing, that you see.
So Kim and Alex, do we think that the windows that are being proposed now sort of generally line up with these right here?
I don't see a window.
Kim, I'm going to forward you an email that has the photo, I think, in question, the exterior photo.
What are you looking for?
This is Bill. Can I just ask a question while Alex is doing that? I guess of Kim.
Yes.
Kim, just as a policy, I just wanted to get this clear. If an applicant can come before either staff or the board and show evidence of a historic window location discernibly, that gives some merit to
establishing the
installing, if you will, or restoring windows to those locations, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. But this isn't where the location was.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, and so where Mr. Bennett says he has some evidence of window openings, if he did have a proposal to reinstall windows in those opening locations, that would be something that would be fairly readily acceptable in your mind?
Well, this being on the north side of the house, it's not generally the natural rhythm of the single house pattern. You know, north side manners is what they typically refer to it as, is a blank wall that, you know, is on the opposite piazza side of your neighbor, so that, you know, you can't see into your neighbor's living room. So we are under the impression that these are not historic openings. They may be old, but probably not an original feature. And that's why we denied the request at the staff level.
And I was just curious, the site plan, I think we had a site plan that seems to indicate there's minimal setback on that north side. So I'm not sure how the building department would look at bringing new openings there.
That's a good question, Julia. There's an easement that prevents the neighboring property, which is also owned by Mr. Bennett, to construct anything closer than 10 feet. That
I don't know if that really would sway building official. I'm not sure. Maybe
they have already approved it.
Okay. Thank you.
And Kim, there were sand warrants, correct? Can you? And can you go ahead, yeah, and circle the buildings in question right there. So we don't have the buildings immediately to the north on this map, I guess, unfortunately.
Right, well, it appears that there's, yep.
Wait a minute, your cursor,
She
I'm-
pointing
I'm
the
try-
right one?
yeah.
Oh, it's that one.
The reason I was making reference to that is because if there is error there, obviously there could have been windows historically. To Mr. Bennett's point,
Windows.
I guess what I'm trying to understand is if there can be a discernible evidence that there were windows there and the building department's expressed no reservations about relocating windows there, if they were there indeed in their historic positions, would it commonly be a position of staff that reclamation of windows and original historic locations, pending that type of approval from the building department is okay in the exact historic locations of that size indicated by the framed opening.
You're asking if that would be okay if it were the exact same location?
Yes.
It's the opinion of the staff that there shouldn't be windows on the north side, and just because it's conjecture, right? Were there windows on that side originally? Probably not. Could they have been added later? Could they be original? Not sure. But typically there aren't windows on that side of the house. And since he doesn't want to put them back in the location that there is evidence of it, then we don't want to make something worse.
I understand totally. And in new positions, I definitely understand that. I guess my question was if there is very readily evident framed openings that show that windows were in those locations, does that carry merit?
May I say something?
I think that would be appropriate.
There's just, Bill, you're getting at, is that sort of a decision at staff based on that type of evidence?
Yes, I'm asking that question, and I was trying to understand why the reservations of staff. So what I'm understanding from staff in this particular case is that the conclusion of staff is that the window locations proposed are not historic, even as evidenced in the framing openings that are uncovered. They're not aligning up with the openings that are shown. And I do definitely understand that position. I guess what I was trying to do is say, well, if indeed the applicant came back and said, okay, these are the exact locations shown, can we reinstall windows in these locations? I believe that staff was saying that they look at that in a little bit different light because there's precedent there potentially for reinstallation of windows. And that's what I was trying to get at. So there's really a couple of issues here is location and historic evidence that there were windows in that location, exact location of that size and configuration.
Okay. So, man, I let this, the order of this one get all out of whack. We do have a public comment letter in support of the application. I'm just so I can get it in the record, I'm going to read it now. From Mike Schuler, owner of 559 King, who writes that Mr. Bill Bennett and the subject property 174 St. Philip are direct neighbors to my property located at 559 King, sharing a rear property line as well as a permanent access easement from St. Philip Street through the subject property, which I've used daily for the past 15 years to access my office parking lot. Feel that the applicant's request for conceptual approval to install windows on the north elevation of 174 St. Philip is very reasonable in general to improve livability without disrupting the character of the historic building. Moreover, the applicant's confirmation that the facade in question did in fact contain windows previously seems to be perfect precedent for supporting this application. The applicant, Bill Bennett, has been a very gracious neighbor for many years, could possibly be considered one of the most conscientious stewards of his property I know in the city. He employs a full-time dedicated maintenance team who perform year-round maintenance on his historic properties of water quality, in my opinion. I have the applicant to support and continuing to make positive improvements to his property and its livability. Thank you, Mike Schuler. All right, so that's the public comment letter we got. Real quickly, Alex, was there any other public comment that I missed on this application?
No other public comment.
Okay. And so I think we've heard from the applicant, we've heard from the public. We're sort of halfway in board discussion. I think what I'll do is let Mr. Bennett just sort of react to what he's heard, particularly from public comment that's in support. And then let's try to get back into board discussion. It's trying to get us back into the normal framework. So Mr. Bennett, is there anything you'd like to clarify?
I again want to reiterate two things. I understand the staff's position and their hard work about following the rules and keeping things the way they were historically. But this is not a perfect world, and I don't think they had perfect knowledge when they applied, that decision to the property that I have. The evidence to me makes me very strongly believe, and I asked there. I tried to set the stage about this not being a house that was ever jammed up next to anybody else. And the north side property thing, I don't think really applies. I think if you look at buildings that have substantial openings between them, they don't always have windows, but they almost always have windows. Part of my presentation today was to show you the buildings that were near to me. And you showed one across the street. If you could go back for a minute, I'm going to try to tell you something.
Across the street?
Across the street, yes.
There.
All right, that's maybe as close as it's going to get to it. You look at the last single house, the old single house that you see on that property that's 3 stories. That one, that's the oldest house in that neighborhood on St. Philip Street, according to Kevin Everly. It's older than any of the properties that I have. And I think he said it was built by the Aiken family at one point. They built rental houses along, and this was another one that they lived in. The pictures that I intended to include and wanted to include and have on my computer show that house has north side windows.
All the way back.
If you go to the north side, I can't show it to you now, but it's there. I can tell you that I went up and down the street taking photographs between Radcliffe Street and Cannon Street. And I took photographs of the houses that, in my judgment, looked to be at least 100 years old. And on that, have windows on the north side. On the west side of the street, 11 of the 12 houses have windows. Some of them only have 2 or 3 windows, but most of them had substantial windows. And on the east side, 7 of the 7 houses had windows. It's very, very common in that area on both sides. Ones that have windows. So it makes sense that this house originally did have windows, and the examination of the structure itself shows that. I also talked to the other neighbors in addition to Mr. Schuler. I talked to Mr. Holt, who's done a lot of historic work across the street, Bob Holt. I talked to Marco Ramo on the south. I talked to Marion Brabham, who was president of Cannonborough. Hawkins. I'm sorry. Marion Hawkins, president of the Cannonboro Association. And they were all positive about the application, and they were all familiar with the work that we've done. I happen to own the other 2 buildings on each side. I own 6 buildings in there. I'm the neighbor, you know, and on my own property. In addition to that building having north side windows, the building at 176 has north side windows in the rear. The building at 174,
Sorry, Jay.
78, which I also own, has a long series of windows in the rear.
Mr. Bennett, can you wrap up, please? Okay, all right.
We've got enough.
Thank you. Okay, so we're in board discussion. We've got everything out. Let's keep on going.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bill Hugh again. I just wanted to jump in real quick. Okay, I think in my mind, this could be summarized fairly quickly. It appears that the applicant has other evidence that he's telling us he has, that there were windows on the north side of this building. Obviously, the other buildings, that's fine, but we're very definitely concerned with this particular building and direct evidence via historic framed openings, evident historic frame openings, that there were windows in this building. And from what I'm discerning from my exchange with staff was that, and I would believe personally, that if the applicant could come before this board with that evidence and could show us that his proposal is to put windows in those exact sizes and locations of those framed openings, I would definitely be interested in entertaining that and be inclined, you know, probably in a positive way if that direct evidence was available. But in alternate locations or potentially windows maybe being there, it's a lot more suspect. But it again appears that Mr. Bennett does have a lot more information that we're not having in the packet. So my inclination would be to defer this pending Mr. Bennett being able to fully make his case and then fully show us this presentation representing windows to go back in those exact locations of that exact size, which I would be very open to entertaining. That's my really look at this.
All right, let's hear from the other board members. Thank you, Bill.
Bill, I guess I agree with you, and I think it could be like a very streamlined, very simple application and request that either clearly shows there were windows and that's where he wants to restore them, or it doesn't show that. So I think that's all we need, and it's very black and white in my opinion.
Glenn, any other comments?
No, I move for deferral based on lack of information.
Okay, Julia, were you headed down a deferral path, or were you headed down like, if this, then you could do it as
I'm fine with
staff?
that. Let's bring it back and just have it resolved once and for all.
Okay.
And I just want to state real quick, I do agree with that. And just for Mr. Bennett to hear again, if his evidence can show historic window locations, and if his proposal is to reinstall or reestablish windows in those exact locations of those exact sizes, that's what we're looking for.
I agree.
Well, let me ask a question at this point. I want windows.
Well, we're in the middle of a motion.
I'm
We're
sorry.
gonna go ahead and vote here. All right, so is there a motion hanging out there? Glenn, you had made a motion.
Yes.
I'll
Okay, is
second
there-
that.
All right, so Glenn made a motion, Julia, a motion for deferral, correct, Glenn? To allow
Correct.
time to present this information that is we're talking about. Okay.
Right.
Glenn made a motion for deferral. Julia seconded it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, I'll put up for a vote. Glenn,
Yay in favor?
Julia,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
okay, chair votes yay in favor. All right, so Okay, so that gives an opportunity to provide all this information that hasn't been in the initial application.
May I ask a question now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. What more information do you need?
I think it's what you were trying to get into the application.
What I have is where that there were windows. I will tell you that if I have to put the windows in the exact place where there were windows, I'll do that, because the windows are going to make it a much nicer place on the inside, and that people understood that. Charlestonians knew windows were a great thing to have.
Okay.
Mr. Bennett, I'll give you a call tomorrow. We can discuss a meeting about how to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right, next agenda item is 5 Porter's Court.
5 Porter's Court by Julia is requesting final approval for new construction of affordable single-family residence on a vacant lot. It's new construction in the Elliotboro-Cannonboro neighborhood in the Old City District. Just a little bit of context. Here's the aerial just north of Bogard Street. And some existing site photos. Porter's Court is a very narrow street, so this is the view from Google. And here's a survey card from 1985 showing there was a building there. This is such a great picture. And the Sanborn maps. Pretty typical single house. And with this, if Aaron wants to take it from here.
Good evening, board members. This is Erin Lanier with Julia Martin Architects here on behalf of the City of Charleston to request final approval for a new single-family affordable dwelling at 5 Porter's Court. This is a vacant lot between a historic single house and a modern single-family dwelling constructed in 2017. This parcel was purchased by the city years ago with the intention of constructing affordable housing, but in recent years, the court residents have tended to it as a small community garden, as seen here in that bottom right-hand photo. These are just some images of the court, and as you can see, most of the houses have a small painting strip in the front, which is a nice feature on such a narrow street, and that'll be incorporated into our proposed design as well. Next slide, please. This is just a survey of the parcel, and I'll mention we did receive a variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals for a lot of insufficient size. That, of course, is a condition that exists on most of the parcels on this court, and we otherwise meet all the zoning requirements. Next slide, please. Here's our proposed site plan and the Sanborn maps for the area. Up until at least 1985, there was a small single house on this lot that was demolished at some point. And though we aren't trying to exactly replicate it, we are proposing a similarly modest and simple single family dwelling that we think will blend nicely with the surrounding structures. I'll mention we are well below the allowable lot coverage and are not required to provide parking, so there will be plenty of green space on this lot. Next slide, please. There are floor plans, which are really straightforward. This is just a 2-bedroom house. Next slide. Here's our roof plan. We're proposing gable form with architectural shingles, and then we have a small bay in the front that would have a low slope membrane roof. Next slide. Moving to the elevations, we're keeping the massing pretty simple, but providing a little bit of fun and interest with the scallop shingles at the narrow bay in the front. And we have located the entrance, to the left, which replicates the pattern of the existing houses on the court. Materials and features are somewhat related to the house you recently approved just up the street on Humphreys Court. And here again, we'd like to explore a subtle 2-tone color scheme that ties the trim and fenestration together. Next slide. This is our existing and proposed streetscape. It was our goal to respect the height, scale, and mass of the historic structures on the court, and we feel like we've achieved that with this design. Next slide. Given the similarities to our previous submittal, we've gone ahead and submitted final details, which I won't go through in detail, but if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Aaron? Is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, how about staff comments and recommendation?
Yeah, this is a lovely design, appropriately sited, scaled for modest borders court, and a nice bridge between the historic modest single houses to the new construction at the north. The windows seem slightly out of proportion, but they're minimum size for meeting code requirements. So, small house, not big windows. Staff is recommending final approval.
Okay, Aaron, anything to clarify?
No.
All right, is there a motion from a board member? Discussion?
Just a very quick item. I like it. I like the whimsical scallop siding on the bay. One thing I would like the applicant to make sure to pay attention to is the coursing of that siding as it relates to the fenestration, just to make sure that it's executed in a sort of whole coursed way.
Sure.
It's itself well, that there's no, abbreviated scales or partial courses involved in that. So just be very particular about that detailing. Otherwise, I love it. I would recommend, I'll go ahead and make a motion for approval pending that if Lynn's willing to, and Jay are willing to agree to that.
No, I'm a fan of the scale of it. I think they've done a good job with it, especially, knowing that they're working within some boundaries for affordable housing. I think they've done a very attractive job with it.
So, Bill, was that a motion for final approval with a second by Glenn?
I'll make a motion for final approval with just the board's recommendation that attention be paid to the coursing of the scaled siding material to work in coursing with fenestration.
Pay attention to the coursing. What was that again?
Of the scaled hardy scallop siding at the bay to work with the fenestration locations.
All right, so pay attention to the scaled hardy siding of the bay. All right. That's Bill's motion. All right, Glenn, is that, did you second that?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. Let's just do all in favor. Aye.
Aye, in favor.
All right. Next agenda item, 14 Porter's Court.
14 Porter's Court is also requesting final approval for new construction of affordable single-family residence on the vacant lot. And here we are again, just further north. And some existing site photos. Sanborn maps do depict a single-family residence on the lot. And Aaron, if you want to take over.
Erin Lanier with Julia Martin Architects. This is obviously a very similar context and design, so I'll be brief. We have a similar, well, go to the next slide, please. We have a similar lot size here. We're also contending with a utility easement. So again, we'll be set back and have some room for plantings at the front. Next slide. This parcel, as you saw, was also previously occupied by a single house. We're proposing a similar site layout to number 5. And thankfully we're on high ground, so the HVAC and other mechanical can be located toward the rear at grade. Next slide. We have a slightly different floor plan here, still just 2 bedrooms. If you want to go ahead and flip to the elevations. Our design is almost identical to its sister at number 5, but we've adjusted the orientation to again reflect the established pattern of the entry on the right side. And I'll just end with our streetscape. Next slide. Which shows our house, one end from the end of the street next to another affordable house, which I believe was constructed in the last 10 or 15 years or so. And again, our details are included, but that is all I have. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Any staff, excuse me, any public comment?
No public comment.
Okay, staff comment recommendation.
Comments are the same. This is a lovely design, appropriately sited, scaled for the modest Porter's Court, and a nice bridge between the historic model single houses to the new construction at the north. The windows seem slightly out of proportion, but they're the minimum size meeting code requirements. So we are recommending final approval.
Okay, any board discussion?
Mr. Chairman, again, I would make the same comment I made at the previous about the coursing of the scaled siding. And also a very quick question for staff. Mechanical units, are they required to be screened with a an architectural type solution, or is planting acceptable for mechanical unit screening? And I didn't look at the other unit, the other application, but it may be typical for both.
It's not required. It's not required, but we also don't have purview over landscape. So
Just to clarify, where we have a fence indicated between the street and the mechanical. So I think that would hide it.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. And Glenn, if you don't have anything else to add, I would make the motion for final approval with the same board comment as previously about the coursing of that scaled siding in conjunction with the fenestration location. And final approval.
All right, so Bill's made a motion. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Hey.
All right, that concludes the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, bye, guys.
Board members, can we stay on for a moment?
I'm here.
Who stays on, Jay?
Everyone?
Oh, darn it.
Who is it? Just us now, Alex?
No, we still have 6 attendees. I'm not sure how to, there probably is a way to break out, but I don't know. Now it's only 3, 2, 1. Okay, no one else is here. Oh,
Maybe they didn't realize they were still with us.
yeah.
You are all up for reappointment. I'd like to sit down and maybe, I don't know if this is legal, but meet with you and have a cup of coffee or a Zoom meeting and just chat about hopes and dreams for the next term, or whether or not you want to come back for another one. So just expect an email from me reaching out to you all.
And Kim, this would be our last term, is that correct?
Yes.
And this is a 4-year?
3-year commitment.
3-year, okay, thank you. Yeah, look forward to talking with you. But I would grab coffee and not Zoom.
Me too.
So Kim, are we staggered at all, or is the manner in which people have been replaced along the way, has that already put us in a staggered mode?
So in 2016, with the zoning, with the amendment to the BAR thing, you guys all had like a free 1.5 years. And then
Oh, right, okay.
Fillmore and yours was up in 2020. You're currently on borrowed time because you haven't been approved by the Planning Commission, which apparently is okay. So you can choose to accept your mission or not, but you have until 2023, if so.
So what you're saying is if you're in until 2023?
That's right.
Sounds like mission impossible. You can choose to accept this mission.
I mean, after tonight.
Yeah.
Maybe
Listen, I owe y'all an apology for letting that Bennett thing. It went quick into a ditch and I couldn't get it out. And I probably dug it deeper.
Jay, are you his nephew?
No. I was being overly patient with him. Like he's all flutzed with Zoom and this and that. Oh my God.
It's okay. It's okay.
It really is fine.
I guess, and we're just going to be Zooming indefinitely, just for all we know.
Yeah, we're talking about starting again in person. Alex, do you have any insight?
No one's talked to me about that, so I haven't heard anything about it. So.
I know when I inquired with someone who probably doesn't know any more than you all do, he said not before January, but I mean.
I assume we might have conversations about it starting in January, but who knows if it'll change
day by day. I mean, I don't frankly, and I know we want to leave. I'm not trying to make this a conversation, but I think as long as we have the information in front of us, I don't at all mind the Zoom part of it, as long as the public feels as if they're getting a fair shake of opportunity. I don't know if you all have heard any feedback, on that front. I mean, there definitely are less little old ladies who come to sit in the audience, but I don't know. Do y'all have any complaints that people are saying they aren't having a fair shake at public comment, or no?
Not that
No,
I've heard.
I've heard more
The one-
positives than negatives, I
The,
think.
the one thing it does change is people who come to the meeting not knowing whether or not they want to say something, and then they hear the application, and then they,
Right.
they know more about it and they can speak their opinion. They have to kind of come in and have studied all the submissions and then sign up. And
Maybe we readdress that and let people speak freely now that we've got a rhythm down.
Yeah, I think that's a positive. And also, I think the good thing is this is all recorded and it's video recorded, which is, it's kind of cool.
I am sure.
I
if we
gotta go eat my dinner.
Yeah, go eat. Go eat. All right, guys.
Thank
Tim,
you.
I look forward to some coffee. I'll sign the whatevers whenever. You
Right.
can PDF them to me and, or bring them in person and whatever you want.
Cool. All right, guys. Thank you.
all right,
Good night.
bye.